Hello, good evening, everybody. I'm going to call to order the Monday, July 2nd, 2018 Planning Commission meeting. Our person to call the roll just is now ready. I'm sorry. Mr. Ruzzi, can you please call the roll?
Sure. Ms. Hockenberry?
Here.
Mr. Krasner?
Here.
Mr. Puentes is absent. Mr. Rankin?
Here.
Mr. Stevens?
Here.
Ms. Dietz?
Here.
Mr. Wodiska?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, great. Can I get a motion to adopt tonight's agenda?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Perfect. Did you get that?
No, give me 1 second.
I moved.
Mr. Stevens seconded.
We're fast around here.
Got it, yeah, got it. Thank you.
Well, on that note, we have a big agenda, both in the main part of the meeting should go relatively quick. We have 2 work sessions this evening, so if we could keep this quick, that goes for both the commissioners and anybody else speaking, that would be greatly appreciated. We got a lot to do, and I don't want this to be a super late night. We have some suggested times on our agenda. I'd like to keep to those as closely as possible, so let's make an effort to do that. We have no speakers this evening, but Mr. Ruzzi, do you have any receipt of petitions for items not on tonight's agenda?
I do not.
Okay, great. Look, we're already on number 6, which we've just finished.
Several items of interest may be on the work session, so of course you guys can take the speaker series during the work session if you choose, or we could do it now.
Take the speakers.
I'm sorry, the
Petitions?
public petitions, yeah.
During the work session?
I think
I'd prefer.
people of Founders Row.
Okay.
Because normally you wouldn't accept public comments during a work session. So
Right.
He's just saying you could move them up.
I'll take them now. Is that what you're saying?
Oh.
Yeah, I'm happy
We
to
have any
take them now.
petitions,
If they want to speak on the work session items, we can hear those now. Okay, all right. All right, we're all the way to new business, so number 7. The first item is a variance and special use applications for 1119 and 1121 West Broad Street for the Beyer Volvo. So show and tell this evening. I think we're going to begin with the staff report.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Keita Ruzzi, who prepared the staff report on this item.
Wearing many hats this evening.
Good evening, Planning Commission. We have Mr. Painter and Don Beyer representatives here, and they will give a presentation, but I'll just briefly highlight the staff report before they do that, and I'll turn it over to them in a short second here. So the Don Beyer Motors Inc. has filed applications for approval by the BZA for 2 variances and a special use permit. The development proposal seeks to construct a 2-story retail showroom for the Don Beyer Volvo dealership on 1119 and 1121 West Broad Street. Tonight, the Planning Commission is asked to take final action and provide a recommendation to the BZA, and the BZA will subsequently have their public hearing on July 12th. Pursuant to the city code, the applicant is required to file a site plan for the construction of this new structure, but at this time, what's before the commission for consideration are the 2 variances and a special use permit for the proposed project. These applications require approval by the BZA after a recommendation by the Planning Commission, and they include a variance to allow a motor vehicle sales facility to be located within 200 feet instead of 300 feet of an R district. The site is located 208 feet from the WNOD trail, which is zoned residential. A second variance to allow a front yard setback of 20 feet instead of 25 feet in the M1 district, and a special use permit to allow a motor vehicle sales use as a conditional use in the M1 district. The staff has reviewed the conceptual plans and the justification provided by the applicant. Staff believes that the variances and the special use permit requested are justified for the following reasons. First, all adjacent properties to the east, west, and south of the site are currently zoned and used for similar light industrial uses, including auto service, retail, and vehicle storage. Attachments 6 and 7 of your staff report provides maps of these conditions. The proposed development is generally consistent with the intent of the M1 district and do not result in any use or intensity otherwise not permitted in the industrial zoning. As such, no adverse effects are expected from the proposed use on adjacent properties. Second, the proposed building uses include administrative offices and an interior showroom for up to 4 cars. No auto repair or service uses are proposed on this property as part of the development proposal. Third, existing old one-story structures on the property will be replaced with new modern building that offers an improved architectural presence on West Broad Street. Fourth, the proposed site design based on the conceptual plan provided here tonight offers an improved interior and perimeter landscaping. Fifth, no changes are contemplated to the existing vehicular entrances to the site. Pending review of the site plan by the city transportation staff, it does appear from the conceptual plan that traffic conditions would remain the same and no negative impacts are anticipated with the proposed project. The sixth is, in terms of comprehensive plan conformance, the proposed uses for the building that includes urban scale interior showroom and offices generally fit within the business uses envisioned for this area. To conclude, staff recommends that the commission provide a recommendation for approval of the applications with the condition that no parking or vehicle display is permitted within the required front setback or within the area immediately outside of the building between the required setback and the building facade on West Broad Street. With that, I'll turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Chairman Wadiska and members of the commission. My name is Andrew Painter. I'm a zoning attorney with Walsh Colucci. Ms. Ruzzi did a great job of summarizing the application, so I will be brief. I know there are other things on the agenda. But I did want to highlight a couple of points. Don Beyer Volvo, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, has been operating in the city since 1959. It has its existing dealership showroom at 1231 West Broad Street, just up the street from the application property. And that building was constructed in 1959. There is new vehicle inventory and storage that takes place on adjacent parcels, including properties in Fairfax County. The service department is located right down the street at 1117 West Broad Street, so about 400 feet away from the existing dealership showroom, across from the Staples on West Broad. As we talked about a couple weeks ago, Volvo Cars recently issued new image program and brand requirements for all dealerships that they have to comply with in order to hold on to their franchise. And so Don Beyer Volvo either has to upgrade the existing vehicle showroom or locate in a new vehicle showroom that meets those requirements. And so we looked at upgrading the existing dealership, but we found that to be cost prohibitive as well as disruptive to the ongoing operations for the dealership. We also looked at relocating the dealership showroom in an existing mixed-use development project elsewhere in the city, but we found that the geographic distance as well as the tenant fit-out costs would make that basically inefficient. So we focused in on 2 properties that are actually owned by Don Beyer Volvo, and that is known, as you all know, as the old Preston Sign Building, as well as the like new auto detailing building as well. Both of these have been owned by the dealership. They have equal visibility on West Broad, just like the existing dealership showroom. They're adjacent to the existing service department, which we viewed as a plus. And they are surrounded by existing M1 zoned industrial and auto-related properties. And so we also saw this as a neat opportunity to consolidate our administrative offices, the dealership's administrative offices, into one location as well, and be even more efficient. As Akita mentioned, we are requesting a special use permit. We're requesting 2 variances as well, which the staff report goes into. And then as far as the building design, Rui Pont with Penny Design Group, he's the architect. It's basically a 7,600 square foot footprint or so, about 25 feet in height. The first level is going to be dedicated to a welcome display area, customer service, as well as service intake. There is an enclosed service bay on the back of the building for intake for customers. And then the second level, and so you can sort of see the front. Rui, if you want to go ahead and...
Okay, this is the showroom component. These are sales offices, and this would be at the back side. This is your service intake, which would be where your drop-off for vehicle servicing. And then the service building is across the drive. So a very efficient layout, and the fact that it wraps around gives us the opportunity to, cars won't queue out on the street. There'll be plenty of room, so it'll be completely on-site when people are driving up.
We are fully parked, just slightly above the minimum parking requirement. And here's the concept site plan. It shows a couple of different entrances off of West Broad Street. It shows interparcel connectivity between our property and the adjacent Kia dealership, as well as sort of punching through to the existing service drive as well. And then, of course, you can see the building and then the first floor drop-off for the cars, too. All of the aisle widths are sufficient for emergency vehicle ingress and egress. The second floor of the building really is dedicated, it's a little over 3,000 feet, and that's dedicated primarily for administrative offices upstairs.
So the second floor of the building is really this component because the showroom is 2 stories. So this would have a lower level and an upper level, while this is 2 stories, and then the service, there's nothing over the service drive. That's an appendage to the building that's at a lower level. So here we'll have some private offices, some open workspace, and employee, and staff offices as determined. We haven't quite figured that out yet, but I'm sure we'll use it.
And this new building does meet Volvo's new brand image requirements.
Right.
As we discussed a few weeks ago, we have gone to Volvo Corporate. We've shown them the preliminary sketches and what is before the commission this evening, and ultimately the BZA. Not only did, and Rui, you can sort of supplement what I'm saying.
Doing well.
But not only did they appreciate it, but they are viewing this as sort of a prototype for urban dealerships on the East Coast on a going forward basis, which we think is pretty remarkable. There will be building-mounted signage, all internally lit, LED lighting for all signs. And what I thought I would do too, I recognize John Altman, who's the chief operating officer with the dealership at the work session. I wanted him to just sort of underscore the importance of the dealership wanting to remain in the city and how this allows you to do that. So, John.
Yeah, no, thank you. Appreciate your time tonight. I think you're all familiar with Beyer Volvo. We've been in the city here since 1973. This is an important dealership for us, even though we've grown over the years. This is still our home base. This is where we started. And we're a big part of this community here. And we want to continue to be a part of the community. We have had some challenges lately with some of these facility things that we've been working through. We think that this is a great solution that works well for the family dealership, and we think it's a great improvement for the city and something that will that will fit in long term with the rest of the area and making it functional and much better looking, we believe. Thank you.
So with that, we'd be happy to answer any questions. I will say that the hours of operation for the dealership are proposed to remain the same. No loudspeakers, even though there is service intake here, there is no actual service going on here. It really is relocating the dealership showroom from one location about 380 feet to the east to this property.
We have those guys that
We promise we will not.
Those are also prohibited in the zoning.
Those green guys?
Legal sentence.
All right, well, thank you. Let me I wasn't here at your last presentation. What is the plan for the current location, the current showroom? I know that's not part of this application, but are there now 2, or we're going to just
No,
get
so
rid
this-
of one?
This is basically just to move out of that operation, and then to allow us to open the possibilities for potentially developing that site.
I see. Okay. And from this rendering, it doesn't look like, when you say it's a 2-story showroom, it's not 2 stories of glass that they're displaying cars, or am I
No,
missing?
this is the only visible glass. This is an etched panel. It's a glass, but it's white. And the idea is that you have these little view windows. So this would be at the corner. This is what faces Broad Street. So this is the entrance, and it's has a little entrance canopy that's done in wood, a Scandinavian look wood. And then you have these clear glass view portals where you see, a vehicle. The idea is to, sort of be very, very precise and not flood you with a lot of images of the car, but just have one very, really nicely detailed vehicle display, and that's kind of a less is more idea. The idea is that it's supposed to be a little, sort of a little jewel of a building. So this is all an etched white glass panel, and then this would be an aluminum panel where we have windows for the 2-story space.
Okay. And within the showroom, it says 2 stories. Are there cars on 2 stories,
No,
or just all on
it's one level. The idea is just to give you the volume, because the internal offices will have glass that will overlook the showroom. So when you come in, the idea is like, if you're entering a home, you have a 2-story foyer, you'll have a greeter there, but the offices are all going to be within a 10-foot ceiling height. Just the showroom will be at a 20-foot height.
Okay. All right, well, let me turn it over to my fellow commissioners and see if they have any questions about this. Go ahead, Mr.
I
Stevens.
gather there's no concern about the condition of not putting a automobile in the front, in the setback.
Well, Volvo, in urban dealerships, that's not really kind of even if we wanted to, it wouldn't really go with, the Volvo standards wouldn't allow that.
Of course, if it was a Polestar 1 plug-in hybrid, maybe that would.
Well, you know, I'm sure you're getting one of those Polestar cars, right?
We are meeting next week with Volvo to talk about the Polestar.
Yeah.
potentially
Exciting,
Coming here
exciting.
to
Yeah.
Polestar. There'll only be
That-
one in the.
Right, and that's gonna be the one that's gonna be right in that view window.
I think you told us that during the work session that you would accomplish the 20% reduction in phosphorus on-site.
Yes.
Okay.
I think,
You know, also I wanted to say, one of the things that you sent me on that well buildings was, you know, we're very familiar with it, and that is part of Volvo's image standards. All their lighting fixtures, everything that they have is really, you know, geared towards that. Very, very low energy consumption, and also it's, you know, it's what they call the dark sky rated fixtures. That's all part of their approval, the dealership approval.
Right.
I think a lot of my comments were addressed, well, we chatted more at the work session on this. And I think I saw the response letter from just a week ago with the city, and I think that also, some of the questions I had about the actual variance and special use plat, you know, I think addresses that. I think interparcel, just to confirm, there is gonna be an interparcel with the, because your service, or parts department and service is
Sure.
right
Yeah.
there, right? So there'll be the ability for, whereas now you have to take cars out on the street, now which we often see, you know, we see Volvos coming out of that with bad visibility, trying to make a, you know, left and go back.
That's how I
They're
learned to
jockeying.
drive, was taking those lefts onto Route
Right.
7 in rush hour traffic.
So this should cut
Completely
down on
eliminate
a lot of that, if not
Yeah,
all
it
of
should-
that.
It should eliminate it completely.
That's a big plus, yeah.
Yes.
And I think we also confirmed previously that any kind of vehicle, like new car delivery will not happen in the middle of Broad Street.
Correct.
Not at this location, that's
All
right.
right, good.
And we did go back to the delivery trucks to make sure that they are forbidden, and we made sure that was written in to make sure that they are
Right.
never doing that. So,
Okay.
You underscored that with the Kia dealership too, right?
yes, we did.
You know, I have a couple of questions about the connections for anybody coming out, so they don't have to make a left-hand turn. You said they can go up to Gordon Road
Yes.
and connect up there
I'm sorry.
to the rest of the dealership.
And there's an existing signal right here.
Yeah, I know, but there's no connection from there to the, is there?
Creating a connection through the Kia dealership.
Yeah, but that's only for a right-hand turn.
This would take you up to the signalized
Birch,
intersection.
right.
Right.
But then they'd have to go, if they
On
wanted to
Broad
go
Street.
west.
That's correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
Because I was kind of concerned about that. You said the queue wouldn't be that long. Could you show me on the picture where the people would be bringing in their
Sure.
service vehicles?
I can show
Yeah,
you
that
on the,
back one's probably the easiest one to show.
yeah, that's the easiest one.
Yeah, so they'd enter in off of Broad Street here, and they'd come into sort of the Sally Port.
Okay.
And drop the vehicle off, and then it would move straight into the service
Okay,
delivery bay.
okay.
And I think you counted up the number of cars as far as queuing or stacking on site, and, you know, this is a two-bay drop-off area. So how many would you
We
able to?
counted six.
Six
Yeah.
cars from property entrance into the existing
And
auditorium.
for this size showroom, the recommended Volvo Q is only 4 cars. They've got a lot of data, and
And
4
there's,
is
where
about
is the
maximum.
parking for, we hope, all the customers that are going to be buying automobiles from you?
Yeah, it'll be in the back of the dealership, and I think that
Okay.
there's 30 spaces,
20s.
26 spaces.
So is that really convenient for your customers?
Yeah, that's pretty much the prototypical way that most of the dealerships are set up now, with the parking behind the building to display the building
Yeah.
itself up on the front of the road. It does add significantly more parking than we currently have in front of Volvo right now. Always our challenge is keeping that front area clear. This actually will help.
Yeah, well, as long as they can connect back to Gordon Road and there's good signage to take them back there, because not only that, but going back through the property behind that kooky little road, you know, that you have to take to get up to Gordon through there is a little strange. It looks like you're going into somebody else's parking lot all the time. But, yeah, I was just really concerned about no left-hand turns out of there. That would be absolutely deadly. Of course, I've seen people do it from that area. Uh-huh. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I had a quick question. The 25-foot setback, that's because it's M1 zone. In B1 zone, it's 20 versus 25. So that's not unusual. And that side is already sort of redone, I mean, a long time ago, but it'll just match and.
It's actually at 14 now, the setback.
14.9.
Yeah. So with this little entry portal, we're trying to create a streetscape because, architecturally, as we see the rest of the street developing, we think that this will be the
Right.
line that you'll want to keep in your master plan. And Anjanette, isn't that correct?
Yes, yeah, and the future zoning map is B1.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, my only hesitation, honestly, as I mentioned last time, was, just building a new building right in the middle of Gordon Triangle somehow decrease the chances of bigger redevelopment down the road, but it sounds like it could free up redevelopment up the street a little bit earlier, and it sounds like you guys are aware that this may not be a 50-year building, so.
Precisely, yeah. This is sort of the phase one to help us consolidate the dealership operations. Ultimately, we would love to have the dealership in the bottom of a large mixed-use building. That would be the more ideal thing. We believe in this urban landscape that is becoming more and more urban every day.
Right.
So this would, correct, not likely be something that we would keep as long as we have with the current dealership. But what it does do is it opens up that 1231
Yeah.
West Broad.
Right.
Then to do sort of a phase one to start the
Right.
ultimate plan and evolve it.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, this seems like an upgrade in all ways over what's there now, so. Seems good to me.
There was an original plan a long time ago for the mixed-use building there with the Volvo showroom there, and, so that has come down the pike before.
All right, great. Well, I mean, my own view is that, sort of similar to Mr. Rankin, is this is a big upgrade over what's there currently. I have no problem with the various variances and the application based on its location to other, R1. I feel like in this instance, it's more of a technicality than it is a decrease to the overall environment of West Broad Street. So I don't have any problem with it on its merits, and I think this is an upgrade visually for sure. It sounds like the other concerns about the environmental issues, and it looks like there's some more green space here than perhaps was before. So sort of in all respects, I think this is fairly, it is an improvement. So I don't have any issue on it at all. All right, well, thank you. I think we're supposed to take some action this evening on this. Get it off our books.
I was going to say, Mr. Chair, there is a recommended, proposed motion, rather, in front of the staff report.
Yes, I see it here. Okay.
I'm happy to move that.
Then I'll hear that motion.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I move that the Planning Commission recommend approval of B 1601-18, B 1602-18, and U 1603-18 to the Board of Zoning Appeals for public hearing and action on July 12th, 2018, subject to the following condition. No parking or vehicle display is permitted within the required front setback or within the area immediately outside of the building between the required setback and the building facade on the West Broad Street.
I'll second it.
Discussion?
Yeah.
I'm going to support the motion, obviously, but I think it's a good thing that overall, just to get down, just the planner and me would be remiss if we didn't just real briefly touch upon the variances. And I think that actually Ms. Ruzi's memo does a good job of laying out the stuff the BZA is going to need to consider as far as meeting the tests in state code for the variances. I think the issue of the distance to the R district is a very strong argument, and I think the BZA, I hope will have not have a problem, looking at that as a true hardship. I think the issue of the setback issue is more of like a mismatch between our comp plan, perhaps, or our streetscape standards and current zoning. It's a little messier, but I think overall, with the changes in state code that allow you to look at unreasonable restriction beyond just hardship, I think perhaps that's how the BZA will get there. So I'm comfortable recommending to them that they go ahead and approve the variances and the special permit. Also for conditions, I mean, I don't know, we should open to adding other conditions. I mean, I know that you don't want to unload any cars on Broad Street, but I've seen it happen a couple times over the years, probably due to some truck driver who, was lost or something, but I'd like to add a condition that all vehicle delivery occur on site. I don't know if there are any other conditions people want to tack on, but I'd recommend that they condition it, the special use permit, to that restriction as well.
So This comes back to us at site plan as well, right?
This is recommended to the BZA. I mean, the BZA is going to adopt, I guess, whether or not to adopt these conditions, but we're recommending the one condition that's in here related to the no parking or display in the front setback. I mean, I'll throw it out there if the commission's willing to support me, but I would say no, all vehicle delivery must occur on site.
What does the applicant say? I mean, I'm certainly willing to support that. We're always concerned about traffic on West Broad Street, and we've had this come.
Especially up that area.
Yeah, we've had this come before us on like the banking issue, banks in the area.
I believe that we can, I believe that we can make it work with what we have set up on the side of the building for the trucks to pull, to back in and to unload and to pull straight back out. So I do believe that that should be achievable with what we have set up here.
Yeah, typically you need 57 feet, and we have over 75 feet building length.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
The standard is 57 feet for a truck to back in for loading, and we have 75 feet available to us, plus the 14 feet that's in front.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got to make sure this is future-proof. I mean, currently, they're unloading on Gordon Road, or sometimes back up on our lot up on Shreve Road. Those may be gone at
Okay.
some point in the future, right? So we have to make sure that we can.
That's in the county, so I don't know, I guess you're doing it over there. I guess.
Yeah,
that's
we try to do most of our loading
Right.
By drone.
up on that little gravel area up there.
Right.
That's the most convenient place to do it right now.
Mhm.
Um,
Well, I just don't want to see it on Broad Street. I mean, and this is a recommendation to the BZA, if the BZA wants to tweak the language, but that's really the main thing I'm looking for, is to make sure that it's abundantly clear, even though I know it's maybe part of your operating procedures anyway, but by having it in the conditions, it then kind of puts everyone on notice that the approval, is contingent on that.
Mr. Chairman, I think we can agree to that.
Fantastic. Mr. Stevens, are you willing to adopt that friendly
I am.
adjustment?
I am too.
Great. Okay. Any other discussion on it? All right, fantastic. I'm always used to looking at Ms. G over here. Ms. Ruzzi, do you understand the friendly amendment?
Yep, I do.
Okay, great. Everybody else on the commission clear on what they're asking for? Okay. So can you please take a roll call vote?
Sure. Ms. Hockenberry?
Yes.
Mr. Krasner?
Yes.
Mr. Rankin?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Ms. Teets?
Yes.
Mr. Wadiska?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Sounds unanimous. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
When do you plan on beginning?
As soon as possible. Supposed to have this thing done, I don't know, very quickly.
We'll be back for site plan next week. Thank you.
Call your congressman. Okay, that finishes item 7A. We have no other business, and now we're on to minutes. We are cruising. Anybody have any comments on the June 18th minutes? I had one comment.
Abstain.
Sounded like a great meeting.
It was incredible.
Had a nice presentation on time.
Signs? Everywhere signs? Blocking up the scenery? I have one complaint about the signs.
One complaint. All right, I have one minor comment. I need to find it. Oh, okay. Just on line 78, there was an unusual misspelling, and I just wanted to make sure it was adopted.
Chaos.
Yeah, I'm gonna spell that C-H-A-O-S. K-A-Y-O-S.
Move to turn on spell check.
Are we supposed to be proofreading?
Well, I didn't know what I recommended.
I think if you see a word misspelled, you should.
Anybody else have anything else?
See something, say something.
All right. Can I get a
You just
motion
ignore
to adopt the June 18th
So move.
meeting minutes? Second?
Second.
All right, you two are doing all the work tonight.
Hey.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Abstain.
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 All you abstainers, raise your hands so she knows. Shame.
Shame upon you.
Thank you.
Did you get that? There were so many, you need to write them down. Okay.
Just look who was absent, and it's actually listed in the minutes.
We talked
I'm
about
just
it.
giving you a hard
There's
time.
a
Any
public
planning
record.
commission reports? Item 10 of the agenda.
Just very quickly, Arts and Culture Group met, and it was mostly about Founder's Row, and Peter Batten was there and answered a lot of the questions that were asked about the parts of Founder's Row that that group is very interested in, you know, as far as the outdoor area and the fountain and all that, the water feature and, you know, a lot of things like that. So it was a very good meeting and quite intensive. That's it.
Okay. Anyone else? Mr. Stevens?
Yeah, the EDA took up the downtown plaza again at their last meeting, and they're going to defer any additional action on their part. The additional bid submissions did not significantly reduce the cost, and they're still looking at something north of over $1 million to redo the park. So they want to more carefully consider the wisdom of that in the current economic situation that the city faces. So that's where that stands.
Okay, that's actually news to me. Anyone else? All right. Mr. Stoddard, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple items on the planning director's report for this meeting. First, just a brief update on the Planning Commission's work plan. Things are continuing to move as scheduled during the Planning Commission's advance earlier this year. Things to keep you aware of, the West End Small Area Plan, we began internal discussions earlier today on getting ready for a third quarter kickoff on that plan. We're probably either looking at either an October or October would actually be fourth quarter, but we're either looking at September, October, and the idea, of course, to synchronize that kickoff along with the closing of the RFP process for the West Falls Church project, so that one is informing the other. East End TAP, this is for the Eden Center as well as properties leading in the direction of the East Falls Church Metro Station. That's scheduled for November 14th and 15th. This will be similar to the Urban Land Institute's technical assistance panel that was conducted for the west end of the city. This will be another opportunity to convene experts in real estate as well as community development about what might be possible for that area. Be a 2-day event to get their ideas. Yes.
Random tangent. Does the change in ownership of Oakwood signify anything?
So we've been talking about that on staff recently. The Planning Commission may not be aware. Recently, there was a purchase of the Oakwood Apartments, which is one of the 2 large apartment buildings along Roosevelt Boulevard. It looks like this may be a trend within the region as well as the apartment market, that when you have a building that is several decades old, 4 or 5 decades old, it's time for reinvestment and rehabilitation, that the fixtures and the amenities become older and out of date. And so I think this is seen as an opportunity to take the existing asset, do a minor facelift, and keep it relevant in the market.
I think it was
Interestingly,
purchased by
though-
someone called Insight. Is that any
Yes.
relationship to
Yep.
the?
It is the same group as the one that's looking at the Broad and Washington project, yes.
Yeah. What's interesting about that is that they did a refurbishment of the inside of it. They were rolling it through the buildings. For a while, they were renting quite a few apartments at Pearson Square because they would empty a building and redo it. But they didn't do anything on the outside, so maybe that's, but it's funny, they just
Yeah.
gutted a lot of these buildings.
From
and
what I
redid
heard,
them.
it's all going to be in the amenities spaces. And
Is that what it
things.
is?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
All right,
8 million.
sorry for the derailment.
But obviously, that is something that's we're taking a look at within the context and scope of the TAP, that we want to understand how are older properties in the area positioning themselves, and certainly that's consistent with looking at an update to the city's housing chapter in the comprehensive plan, that how do all of the city's housing markets or niches within the housing market fit and continue to prosper.
I guess one thing too about Inside, are they going to continue to operate it the same way Oakwood did, with a lot of short-term stays and furnished apartments? Or is they gonna, if they're up in the amenities, are they gonna go into a full-blown apartment, like normal apartment kind of strategy?
Yeah, the idea of how they're going to position it and who they're going to market it to, I think that's something we can look at further. That's probably something we could reach out to them on. So that's the East End TAP for the city's small area planning efforts. Current planning, as you know, Founders Row is here tonight. We'll talk more about that item. Other city projects continue to make their way through the process. Zoning ordinance and future land use map updates. This is, the group had talked about updating the Greenway Downs overlay as well as the M1 and B district references. And I think that's something that we can look to kick off in the third quarter of this year, resources, of course, allowing. And then the comprehensive plan updates are going well. Natural resources chapter and housing chapter both kicked off with the Planning Commission. Natural resources or environment chapter has gone to council, and housing chapter is scheduled to go to council later this month. So that's the update on the Planning Commission's work plan. Community profile, I mentioned this at the last meeting. The city's first annual community profile has now been published. This was the one follow-up item identified in the city's vision chapter, the idea of regularly reporting major milestones, events, and trends and changes on the city each year. And it's intended to be obviously engaging information, thus the heavy use of graphics, but it's also intended to be a document that is accessible and usable by a wide range of audiences: city staff, general members of the public, boards and commissions, folks who may want to invest in the city or redevelop properties, to tell them what kind of place the city is and what it's looking for going forward. Bicycle and pedestrian safety and connectivity. Also in your packets, there was a publication put out by Transportation for America, and it was a look at how communities are increasing pedestrian safety throughout the country, that a lot of places in the U.S. built themselves up as post-World War II suburbs, similar to what Falls Church is, and at the time, obviously, auto connectivity and auto throughput was a major focus of design. People are now looking at a new way to design their cities, and so they're looking at new ways to retrofit pedestrian and bicycle features into the landscape. And there were three takeaways that I noticed in the report, and they're listed there at the bottom of the screen. One, designing, I guess it shows up all right on that screen.
This is different than what I received in the packet, by
Right.
the way. I just FYI.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I had different ones, but
I can follow along.
Sure.
I'm man.
So the three takeaways were, one, designing the streets to balance the needs of people traveling by different modes of transportation, foot, bike, and car. Two, engaging the community in decisions about street design, that all the examples shown in the booklet included examples of public workshops and ideas of members of the public and technical experts sharing ideas to come up with solutions that are safe and work for everybody. And then also using materials, and this is an idea that the city staff and boards and commissions have been talking about for a number of years, the idea that streets are for people, not necessarily for cars, and using the design of the streets to show that these are public spaces. Just within the city's commercial areas, right-of-way accounts for about 20% of the city's land, the land area within the city. So obviously that's 20% that you want to use to brand the city, and that's consistent with the streetscape updates, that the streets are the biggest branding effort the city has.
Yeah, I was really struck by just right in the introduction, it talks about the increase in number of pedestrian deaths. Because more people are walking, but there are also more people out there and more people are getting hit by cars.
Mm-hmm.
And I really look around the city, and this is actually something one of my Girl Scout troops brought up to the council and got some crosswalks over near TJ about a few years ago. But we still have a lot of crosswalks that are not very visible. And I think the more visible the crosswalk is, the more cars are really understand it's someone going to cross there. And I think it's a paint, in some cases we're just talking about some paint. You know, and I know that if we try to redesign an intersection, that brings in a lot of ADA issues and engineering. But I have to think that we could at least update the paint at some of these crosswalks so they're visible.
Or just repaint things that have worn away. I mean,
Right, that's what I'm saying.
Right,
I mean, there's some that aren't even that old that like the city just
It wears
repainted it
off.
and they wore off within like a year. Like at
Wears
Weston,
off.
at my corner at West and Lincoln, it's like they was just all redone last year and it's already worn away, like as if it
Yeah.
was 20 years old. It's I don't
And
know,
one of-
contractors on the hook for
Yeah,
that.
and
but-
one of the things that girls saw too, that the crosswalks you see the most is where there's more than one color. Like, even if it's just white and the city's
Right.
green,
I was just gonna mention that.
just
yeah.
because a two color contrast makes a big difference. They wanted rainbow crosswalks, but Mr. Shields said that probably wasn't going to happen, so they did not get rainbow ones. But they had seen crosswalks that were rainbow, and they're very super visible. And so, what?
Unicorn.
No unicorns and no pot of gold, just rainbow. No, but it was a visibility thing because
Right.
when you're driving up to an
Nice.
intersection and there are, especially if there's bump outs in a well painted crosswalk, you really see it as people could possibly cross here at any minute. When you drive up to something that's just like a four-way stop sign, but you don't see the crosswalks, I don't think you think about it as much. I think it's just the way you look at it. Anyway, but that's what really struck me just when I started reading it, and I was like, well, that's an awful thing. We're walking more, but we're getting hit more.
And that was a study down in Orlando, that whole,
There were
Mostly?
3 areas, and
It was Orlando,
Or-
Lexington,
yeah.
Kentucky,
Yeah.
and South Bend, Indiana.
right.
it was a pretty good smattering of different places across the U.S.
Yeah.
That these are not the most urban of
I
urban
liked
areas.
some of the, with the artwork and some of the, that again is a branding thing to make things a little bit more noticeable and say, hey, you're in a different place, which is, if we're looking at branding the whole city, with the arts and things like that. Back to the community, part of the vision statement. Is that online already? I know you put it out in your report.
We're looking at that idea of the planning library that came up during the Planning Commission's advance has caught a lot of interest, and we are looking at finding a way to roll that out.
Yeah, because that's a really good piece of information that probably could be up front, on our website because of all, the vital information, what kind of a community it is. And it would be, as you said, valuable to commercial investors and everything, but anybody just even looking to move here. That would be one of those things up front and center that somebody might want to look at, because it's very well done, and all the illustrations and everything were.
I will pass that along to the staff that worked on it. Thank
Yeah.
you.
No, it really was.
We've talked about the idea of a welcome packet for new residents, that as people move into the city, how can they identify opportunities to participate, major things that are going on in the city or things that may be of interest that maybe they didn't know about, and certainly putting it in front of the city's homepage or somewhere up front on the website would be a good way to let people know.
Because we are still lacking a connection with the arts and culture group, with all the activities being linked somehow to the city website, so you can see what's going on and things like that. So, all that I think could be better. But I will say, just to comment, the focus part, the weekly focus,
Mhm.
that is so well written right now.
Who writes that?
It is really good. Claire,
Yeah, it comes out of the Office of Communications, Susan
Claire,
Pinarelli
it
and-
is
and
funny,
Claire.
it's storytelling, it's delightful to read, it's really clever, very well written.
I agree. All right, terrific.
Kudos,
All right, I will let her know.
because lots of times we complain about communications.
We just went through our annual performance evaluations, but I'm sure it's not too late to add a letter of commendation from a planning commissioner.
Okey doke. Talking about it's not enough, huh? But we were talking, a lot of us were mentioning that today, well, a bunch of us talking.
I think that was it for yep, and that was it for the planning director's report.
Okay, wonderful. We are way ahead of schedule.
Ahead of schedule.
I
Unbelievable.
love it.
You proud of
Everybody's-
us?
I'm
Unbelievable.
proud. I can hear the cadence is up. Everybody's
There's
engaged.
no game on tonight?
Yeah. All right.
We also did the easy stuff.
We did. All right, now on to the harder stuff. We're now moving into the work session. The first item is this zoning text amendment B2. And
We have to adjourn formally.
No, we actually stay in session
Stay in
now
session for this.
to make it clear that we're still recording.
Oh, we do? Okay.
Mhm.
though if we need a bio break, we can do it. If
No, I don't know. In the past, I know we had to make a motion.
Yeah, we used to
Technically.
adjourn.
Oh, you were gonna jump to it.
Just
we are staying in session.
dotting the i's and crossing the t's,
Our fans can't get enough.
You
I
mean
mean,
Gordon?
our fan, sorry.
Gordon's our only fan. He's the only one who watches.
I got my
My wife watches too.
Oh, you're,
Come
oh,
on,
I'm sorry, your dad.
only our
and my
family and
husband.
All right, the B2 text amendment, are we getting, I see we have a staff report.
Yes, in your packet, there should be essentially two staff reports. Cover memo specific to the Planning Commission, and then the staff report that went to council, which of course has all the relevant information.
The planning one was a few words, and council gets all the publicity.
It's part of our move toward efficiency, so we can highlight what's relevant to the Planning Commission, but of course not redo work, good work that's already been done. I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Susan Bell, who's here to, as well as Carly Aubrey, to provide the staff report on the item.
Excellent, thank you.
You can go ahead.
Sure. Good evening. I'm going to run through this amendment in some detail, and then obviously we'll have time for questions. But if at any point in my remarks it looks like we need to make a pause, please say so. We'll go ahead and do that. As you know, when the school site came into the city, the zoning on the property was R1A by virtue of the way the zoning ordinance is constructed. That's a single-family district, and so to make use of it for the proposed high school amendment and or redevelopment, and to allow the up to 10 acres to be developed with a mixed-use commercial project, the property needed to be rezoned appropriately. Staff's analysis is that the B2 district is the appropriate zone, but currently the B2 district does not provide some of what is needed. Specifically, in terms of a high school, the height would be limited, and in the case of the commercial, there would be a limit on 115 feet. So in order to create the flexibility that is really necessary, we are proposing a new special exception provision, which I'll get to in just a moment. There's two elements to this zoning ordinance amendment. The first one is fairly narrow. The second one is the one that we're here to really discuss. The first is updating language in the permitted uses with respect to group homes. This is something that the city is undertaking across the city code. It's a comprehensive effort, but since we had opened up this district, it was decided that it would be appropriate to take care of this now. What it does is for group homes that are by right use today, it simply updates the language to reflect the correct state agency names and changes none of the permissions or requirements for those uses. It just parallels the state code. To the more specific issue, the reason that we're here to discuss B2, the special exception provision is one aspect of it, but the first amendment to the district, beginning on line 408 of the longer board report, we are allowing for by right development of an elementary or secondary school up to 7 stories in height. The 7 stories may not be the ultimate height of the proposed or selected developer for the school. The intent was to give the school board effectively enough latitude to approve the building that they need to approve on their site. But that is still a by right use. It also allows parks and playgrounds, which are also already permitted. The second element is to create a new 2-step special exception provision that signals the city's specific intent to approve a significant mixed-use commercial project on the commercial site up to 10 acres. And as you know, that is intended to help fund some of the costs associated with the high school. We felt that it was appropriate to do it within the B2 zone rather than to create a new zone because frankly B2 is a good commercial zone. It's the central business district zone, and a new district standing on its own seemed to be it just seemed to not help us in terms of the construct of the way the zoning ordinance is today. So I'm just going to review the elements of this ordinance for you and then go into the process description. In order to be eligible to use the new provision, the new special exception provision that is sort of the meat of the matter, the site would have to be designated a special revitalization district for education and economic development on the future land use plan map and be a minimum of 5 acres in size. That is a threshold for eligibility for a site to even be considered for this. In addition, we speak to density, use, height, and then of course process and parking. In terms of density, since the city's zoning ordinance is not a density-based ordinance, we are leaving it flexible, which is to say that while there is language in the goals that the City Council adopted in January with respect to ultimate FAR. We're not putting that in the ordinance. We're not recommending that it be put in the ordinance so as to allow council more flexibility at the time of an actual approval. So density is mentioned, but it's not regulated, and the intent is that it be consistent with those goals that were adopted in January. In terms of uses, there's a couple of things that are important to note. When a developer goes through the process that we're proposing, they will give up their by right rights for that 10-acre site. What that means is, in the context of their approval, they will need to request from the city council any interim uses that they might wish to use some or all of the property for at the time of that approval. They will not have access to the listed uses under permitted uses in B2 any further. So that's important for them to know. It's important for you to know. And those uses will have some restrictions probably as to scope and time and certainly location. In terms of the go forward, the ultimate redevelopment, we are proposing in this amendment that office, hotel, retail, multifamily, the full range of higher density commercial uses be available for this project. And it, of course, part of the goal is to have a combination of uses that creates a place that is of significant value to the city, both from a community building standpoint, but also from a revenue generation standpoint. Building heights, there's long been conversation about the appropriate heights here because you clearly have a 100% corner at the intersection of Haycock and Route 7, but you also have the high school, and there are concerns about adjacencies there and how high and how many shadows you'll throw across the high school fields or whatever school-related uses may be adjacent to this site. So what we're recommending is that the heights be varied across the site with a maximum height of 15 stories. And depending on the floor-to-floors of a 15-story building, that could be as low as 160 feet or it could be closer to 200 feet in total height. But again, it would be varied, and the goal is to have them be compatible with adjacent development. In terms of parking, we're recommending that this site take a very hard look at its access and that multimodal considerations be foremost in mind. So the various elements that we currently have in the zoning ordinance for shared parking, off-site parking, parking reductions, transportation demand management with additional bike and other kinds of alternate modes, we expect this one to kind of go to the max and then some because we're looking to minimize not only the acreage used for parking, but also to maximize the utility of the parking that is built. In terms of the review process, I mentioned that it is a two-step process, and we're introducing two new processes in essence, and really they're very similar to the current special exception process, but they have new titles because it is unique to this site and this designation. The first step in the process would be called the special exception entitlement. And the purpose of this is to establish the general plan for the entire site and covering what the massing, heights, building locations, uses in sort of gross scale, transportation, amenities, public facilities, and infrastructure. So to get the development framework ironed out at a fairly high level and to establish with that those would be the entitlements that would then be used to judge or evaluate the future submissions. The timeline for this element, or the special exception entitlement, would be that the developer who is selected by the city would submit any time after the exclusive rights agreement is approved. But the review process needs to coincide with the development of the comprehensive agreement and be approved in roughly the same time frame. So what we're talking about is filing sometime after October of this year and approval in the spring of 2019, assuming that everything stays on track. The intent of this application is to have sufficient information so that the developer can subsequently apply for special exception site plans for some or all of the parcels that will be created. But at that time, it would be known where the other buildings were, it would be known where the access roads are, where the open spaces are. So there would be considerable information in hand, and this general plan would be used to guide future approvals. It is intended that the council would approve or deny this special exception entitlement based on their finding that the project substantially achieves the goals of the Special Revitalization District for Education and Economic Development, comprehensive plan, and any site-specific studies. And of course, there would be conditions for that approval, again, at that high level. The intent would be that the elements that are approved at this stage would not be reopened in the subsequent stage unless the developer requests a change due to market cycles or some other purpose. The reviews would, of course, be by staff and the various commissions, including yourselves, and many of those will have to happen in a fairly tight time frame, given that we only have 7 months for all of this to be accomplished. And as I mentioned, this supplants the underlying B2 zoning. So what the developer has at the end of this process is what the developer has. They cannot revert to or abandon the project and go back to by right uses under the existing B2. The second step, which we're calling a special exception site plan, is in essence a hybrid of the current special exception and site plan approval process. It could be for all or any parcels and could be filed as soon as the comprehensive agreement is signed. However, it is anticipated that the developer would probably wait until it was closer to the time when they are prepared to build, because they would want to mirror what the market would support. The elements that are approved in the special exception, in the special exception entitlement would again not be subject to modification or reversal unless the applicant is requesting an amendment. And this, of course, would be required before any construction could occur. As we've currently drafted this, it's intended that this would result in a plan equivalent to the current site plan, would deal with architecturals and the other elements that are typically contained in that process. And again, the council would approve this stage following review by commissions and boards using the same set of standards contained in the comp plan, the future land use plan, goals, and other elements of adopted plans and policies. The city council could, of course, impose requirements in the form of voluntary concessions, and it's possible that the developer might have to seek a modification at some point after the initial approval. The general approval process would be probably a work session, first reading, refer out to boards and commissions, ultimate recommendation, and then adoption or denial by the city council. So in essence, we go from the general to the specific with these two steps. And if you're at all familiar with Arlington's large-scale development projects, it's called a phased development site plan there for the first step, and then a special exception site plan for the second step. There is the potential for amendments to either of these projects, or to either of these stages. In terms of the questions that we've received, or comments that we've received to date, with the concurrence of the city manager and the purchasing director, the 6 firms who were in the initial pool did receive a copy of the draft. It will change again, obviously, before final adoption. But the remarks that we received back from them were concerned about the phasing aspect of it. They're concerned that they might be locked into delivering uses or buildings when the market cycle does not support those kinds of uses or have a willingness to finance them. Another developer commented that they would like more flexibility in the nature of the retail uses that are allowed. We haven't specified any particular uses or excluded any as far as that goes. But in a project that they did in another jurisdiction here in Washington area, they did things like theaters with restaurants, bowling alleys with restaurants, and they wanted some breadth in the nature of the entertainment uses that they might bring to a proposal. A third comment that we received from one of the developers was a more explicit statement of what the process would be for them to revise locations or change uses, and council echoed that as well. So the next draft of this will see some changes with respect to that. Council asked for clarification on the amendment process. Once that's specifically stated, Another council member indicated concern about the proportional language with respect to uses coming online in a proportional way. Another request was that we try and make this ordinance, in effect, bulletproof from the General Assembly, again, extending the length of plans of development. You probably recall that they required everything to be held for 5 years. If they were to go on another legislative bent toward extending them again, that council member expressed some concern about the city not being able to, maintain achieving the goals that they have for the project. And then finally, we were asked to just look at how the site would be redeveloped at a different FAR with different uses. And those constitute my main remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
All right, well, thank you. Do we have any questions, commissioners?
I have one question regarding the school portion of the 34 acres. Am I correct that the two-step process that you outlined with the special exception entitlement and special exception site plan, that doesn't apply, that process doesn't apply to the schools, that they would still have a traditional site plan that would come before the Planning Commission?
There is no change to the school process. That's correct.
Because they would have by right to do a school.
Correct. That's right. If they want to go above 7 stories, that's a whole other ballgame, but I don't think anyone anticipates that.
Got a couple questions. I did watch the video of your report to the council, and that's why I guess there was a request made to have minutes made of it. And actually, the things I'm going to ask about weren't included in the minutes. There seemed to be a couple different questions as to the role of the Planning Commission. When Mrs. Hardy asked you, to make sure that the Planning Commission was still a part of the recommendations, it was yes. And then when Mr. Snyder said something, the answer was a little bit different. He specifically said, who's going to tell, or are you going to tell the Planning Commission that they will have a reduced role in this, or to that effect? So that was really something, and I went back over it, still listening and couldn't quite figure out what was going on. And I know we've had some questions about that.
I think
with the two-step process.
I may have gone over this too quickly, but both the first and the second stage are proposed to be approved by the City Council. So the site plan stage, if you will, the special exception site plan approval would be approved by council following your recommendation. You would not be approving a separate site plan as you typically would do.
Okay, but we would be looking at and doing our due diligence.
Absolutely.
Like we always do, because as Mrs. Hardy said, we know what's in a site plan better than they do.
You certainly have a lot more experience with
Yeah.
it, and I think the council really wants the benefit of that experience.
And I did really think that the questions on proportionality and the phasing was very, very important as to commercial versus residential, particularly, and just the whole fact of trying to include all the new state legislations that are coming across as far as zoning.
Yes.
Putting that in this document, and then the needing for extended ideas about how to do the amendments. But I found that was very interesting. The questions were really good, and particularly about the FARs.
Mm-hmm.
And there's one other thought. There's no mention, you mentioned the height, nothing about the as low as it could be, the height.
No, we haven't put a threshold or a bottom end
Have a
threshold. Two-story limit.
Did we ever do that, the two-story? That kind of comes and goes in our mind.
I didn't think we
thought
had.
we did, or I thought we did.
You thought you did.
You mean
I
a
thought
minimum
we-
height?
Yeah, minimum
The
height,
minimum
that,
of 2
yeah.
stories.
Thank you.
It's
Okay.
actually not in the B2, it's in the use table, so it's a little confusing. But frankly, the way this ordinance proposal is structured, there's great flexibility on heights. So the council could modify it to lower if they chose, or to higher.
Is that where you chose stories as opposed to an absolute?
Yes. yes. It's really difficult because the height of your first level can vary widely depending on the nature of the use. And since everything triggers off of that and whether there's parking below, so forth, it's just better to limit stories and look at it that way.
A bigger picture question, I mean, a lot of aspects of this ordinance, I'll say, are somewhat novel. I mean, I've read a lot of zoning ordinances. There are a lot of aspects of the way this process is crafted that's somewhat unique. I mean, is it based on experience, is it, in other places? I mean, I've not seen some of the way this is crafted before.
It is actually based somewhat on the Arlington structure for large site development. The Arlington zoning ordinance actually has a 20-acre minimum unless the county manager approves it for another site. It's phased development site plan. To give you an example of some of the projects it's been used for, it was used for Pentagon City Mall, the Colonial Village projects, Shirlington, the village at Shirlington, and so forth. And essentially, what you get is the framework approval, and then parcels are created through that process, or paper parcels in effect, and then you come back in for the more detailed approval. And there are conditions at each end, and they lock together. And from a zoning standpoint, both from a administration and enforcement standpoint, and also from a construction standpoint, it actually works quite well.
Is the role of the planning commission in Arlington the same as what's being proposed here in the two-step
Actually,
process?
you all have more authority in many respects than the Arlington Planning Commission does. They do not have final approval authority on any kind of a site plan approval or special exception approval. The county board reserves that to themselves.
But in this proposal, we wouldn't either, right?
You would
Right.
have authority more similar, in that case, advisory, yes.
I think that was where our questions constantly were, when we were talking about what the different things we were hearing.
So,
Yeah, to clarify on that, so, I can't imagine this happening, but if we had a site plan that we basically advised against, city council could ignore that with a simple majority and approve a site plan for this.
Technically, that's correct, yes.
But would it entail a supermajority as with special exception, or just a regular majority?
I'm not an expert on that. I'm going to turn to
Well, I
Paul.
mean, I think
I think
that
if
now
it's,
it's a-
if it's advisory, I would assume it's
Now
just
it has to be a
simple majority.
supermajority.
Okay.
Well, with
Well,
special exception, but
with
that's
special
where we have
exception.
authority.
But
I
that's the
think-
code in special exception.
Right, right.
Yeah, so the code reference in special exception, the mandatory planning commission recommendation does require a supermajority to overrule.
Which is how Founder Row got this far.
As described in this code amendment, it would be a simple majority.
Okay. I guess I've been looking at this and thinking about this for a while, and I looked at the comments from the council. And, I mean, this is the thing, it basically, you're saying we're establishing a two-step special exception site plan approval process. And the reason is to provide the developer with a reliable entitlement earlier in the process while detailed design will be done later. And I'm just trying to understand how's that different than what we do now. We do the special exception when the entitlement is pretty much set. Then they come back and do the site plan later when they're ready to do design. So how is this really, I still haven't, we're spending a lot of time on this, and I'm trying to figure out what the real value coming out of this is. Because I'm not against it, if we want to do it this way, that's fine with me, but I'm just don't understand what the difference is. It's still entitlement first, design later.
Basically.
I think that's true, sort of in the
So what's
most
the key thing,
general
tell me
process.
one key thing we get out of this that makes it better.
Well, I think the key thing is that we have crafted this where the council has a great deal of flexibility in what they can approve. They can modify uses, heights, placement, all
Well,
of
I
those
get that
things.
for the special exception, but that, so we're adding in more flexibility on the special exception.
For this specific
the-
site.
I guess what we call the reliable entitlement section of it, the detail. But I don't I guess I get that part. I don't get the change in site plan.
Well, I think the council, we propose that the council retain approval for both phases, largely because of the complexity of the site and the tight timeline, and the fact that the accountability of it is pretty significant.
Okay, accountability I get, because I think other than that, the current process is probably faster.
I don't think anybody thinks that the current process is broken or taking too
No,
long.
I just think that by the complexity of this site plan process will take longer than the current one.
I think it is a
So
more
I think-
complex process.
I think the one thing I think is the difference is probably the accountability is all on the council, and we don't have the amount of accountability that we normally do.
I think that's part of it, but also it interlocks with the comprehensive agreement and the exclusive rights agreement. And so by having the loop essentially be the same both times, the hope is that the elements that are approved in the special exception entitlement will hold, and there won't be changes, at least from the council, to reopen any of those things. That it will be absolutely as circumscribed in that approval, and that the others will go through the process more efficiently. Not more efficiently than now, but more efficiently than they might be if things were potentially able to be reopened. Because remember, the build-out for this is going to be a lot longer. It
Yeah,
could be
and-
10,
Well, to
15
be clear,
years.
most of that stuff can't be reopened at site plan regardless.
Right, but I think the needle we're trying to thread here is that there's going to be a gap of a couple of years
Before they can do anything.
between the original agreement,
Absolutely.
which is going to partially involve the developer providing a bunch of money to the city, and the point at which they'll start not just building, but like planning what they're going to build. And so I think we're trying to come up with a way that lets city council be somewhat comfortable about approving something that's not totally final, lets the developer feel confident putting up money, knowing that they'll get something that will work, but then work out some of the details. What I'm curious about is and I think this is why everyone's asking about the amendments, is how do we thread that needle so that a developer says, sure, I will commit to a big glob of money to acquire the rights to develop this site 3 years from now, basically based on this plan, but 3 years from now, apartments are not popular, or they're super popular, or whatever it is. And so I think that's the challenge we're going to face, because what we can't, there's two things that we really need, three, but two main things we need out of this is money up front that we know is going to be there so we can build the school, and then the ongoing money that comes from developing certain kinds of stuff. So that's why it's
Make our
proportional. You
payments.
can't just build the apartments and not build the commercial and all the other stuff.
Right.
Right.
But a developer is going to say, well, 3 or 4 years from now, I don't know exactly what I'm going to make money building. So, to me, if developers are happy with it, and I'm happy with it, I mean, I think,
I
it-
guess
it-
I'm more concerned in that 3 or 4 years, we could have a total council turnover. And I think having the council do the site plan politicizes it. Because when we get to that point where it's the
Interesting
site
thought.
plan, we're looking at it as, what's the site plan? It's the safety, it's the final design
Yeah,
of
but I
things.
think,
I'm just.
I know, but I think
that's
that
just-
stuff, the
that's-
city council's not going to care about that. What they're going to care about is when
Well,
the,
they should care.
what they're going to really care, they're going to leave that up to us. They're not going to be like, well, I know planning commission wants the loading dock over here, but we want to, what they're going to care about is when the developer says, hey, sorry, we can't do that commercial, can we replace it with more apartments? They're going to want to be able to say yay or nay. And
Okay.
I think that's going to be the challenge, because then the developer's going to be stuck if hopefully the developer's cool with this, because we got to get a developer to commit years in advance.
Right. I think one of the other aspects to keep in mind is that while there will be a master developer or an umbrella developer who obtains approval of the special exception entitlement, some of those subparcels could be developed by others who are not presently on the team, for example. And so, given the length of the build-out, given the market uncertainty that exists anywhere, but at any time, but certainly over the length of this project's build-out, I think the way that the VCs are structured, the way the amendment process is structured, and the way the comprehensive agreement is structured will be critical for creating certainty on the side of council that they're going to get what they need to support the high school debt service, and at the same time get a place that makes a difference for the community, while the developer still has to, obviously finance it.
So maybe I misunderstand. When we get to the SESP phase, though, I know, I'm trying to get it right.
Mouthful
There's
there.
too many. But are we changing a site plan to allow for wholesale change like that? Like changing out apartments for hotels or hotels for
Well, I think
apartments?
that's the amendment stuff.
But I mean, I get, so we are allowing that kind of, because on site plan, typically you're not allowed to wholesale change whole components like that.
If you were changing
You
a
can
whole
alter it a little bit, but not like that.
If you
Which
were
is why
changing a
Mason
whole
runs back.
component, I think what you'd
Yeah, I know.
be actually amending is that initial approval.
Right, so you'd be going, so again,
Right.
site plan would still end up being on the same things that site plan
Yes.
always is.
I think
So
that's
which
probably
just
right.
goes back to why I don't understand, but I'm okay with it.
Okay.
Well, I'm okay with it as well. I spent a bunch of time with Mr. Shields and Mr. Snyder when this was being developed, and they certainly spoke with me about the process and why the benefits they thought. I think they've been covered here pretty extensively. And the goal here is, and the belief is that it would in fact speed up the process. I'll give some assurance to the developer that the entitlement process would not be quite as extensive as it would otherwise be going through both the city council and the planning commission and being held up by the planning commission, and that the city council would have that kind of accountability was a main feature of it, as was covered. And they approached me, and when we discussed it originally, it had to do with the fact that the planning commission would lose its formal
Right.
approval authority. But as Mr. Rankin has said, and has sort of been mentioned before, it seemed to me at the time and still that it is unlikely that the city council would want to ignore our recommendation on site plan issues. It is formally their ability to say yes or no, but it is going to still come to us,
Always a
and it would
recommendation.
surprise me, based on our expertise and experience, that that would be ignored. But we felt that at the time that this was a more efficient process for what we were trying to tie in all these moving pieces and provide entitlement upfront to the developer, saying this is our plan and this is how we're going to tie it in directly. They would have the authority to make that happen as they were negotiating the comprehensive agreement. So it is slightly different than what we do, but fairly similar at the same time. It was modeled after Arlington. It does have the downside that we do not get a formal approval, but we do have a recommendation, and it is still sent out to us, and we get a chance to review it. Having been part of this development of it, and having walked through those conversations outside of this meeting, I'm very comfortable with it, and I think it achieves what we were trying to, and I think the questions here indicate the kind of concerns that I had and that they were certainly sensitive to at the time of development. But I think the presentation here was really comprehensive and answers sort of all those questions. So I am fully supportive of it, and I think it achieves what we're trying to do, both in on this development and on the school, and try to be concerned about some of the by right issues. I think it's a really well-crafted solution for what we're trying to do.
Right, right.
So,
Absolutely.
I am fully supportive of it.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just again, I did listen to your presentation the other night, and it was excellent. Tonight you did. You're always very good when you come in front of us about parking and all the other things, as far as their clarity and your ability to explain things. So we do appreciate whenever you're brought in to help us out.
Lindy's just handing out.
We need more
compliments tonight.
parking.
Got a letter here.
To have less parking.
That's good.
All right, I think that's, anybody else have any other questions? All right, I think we don't need any action on this. This is a work session, right?
Not tonight, Mr. Chair. This is scheduled to come back to you on July 16, which is the group's next meeting for recommendation to council.
Very well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Second work session is on Founder's Row. This is the special exception amendment. Resolution TR 18-32.
Same kind of stuff is the sticky stuff, like swap it out. What's the question? It's gonna be the same
Welcome to come
stuff
up.
here, but if you want some.
Hand the material
Got
out
some
now
materials.
before your staff
Around this table.
hand it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
That way
They're
you'll
just
have
boards.
more attention.
We'll hold until they're done.
Of course it did.
Do you look online and see if you see the staff report?
Oh, yeah, it did. I was able to check it.
Developers even consider money and then usually shows how strong.
materials.
Oh, we got the material things. Yay.
It's a PowerPoint. And, you know, if you guys are doing great, I'm not sure what this is. You have a clicker or?
Yeah, you can use this whole
Yeah.
array here. It's all
Awesome, I'll
wireless.
just take this and just hit
On this?
next on this.
Or on-
Yep.
No, no, awesome.
The other one. Yeah, yeah,
It doesn't change anything else.
yeah.
All right.
Now,
Because I still don't understand why.
there's some notes about it.
That's the question.
I already read them all, word for word.
Did you read them twice?
I did, and then I translated them into Spanish, read them again.
I think,
Speak Spanish, so had to learn Spanish.
And Letty
you're seeing the experience of
Right,
understood.
dual
also.
application for special exception and site plan simultaneously.
right.
Means large packages.
It seemed like a lot of attachments.
We can just put it all in one PDF next time. The attachment.
What is the 12B
Attached.
versus 12C?
I smiled accidentally in it, so.
Look, everyone knows when Nick gets out his
Right,
camera,
right,
he
we
starts
got,
doing stuff like this.
Ours.
What? When Nick gets out his
There's
camera, he starts
a
doing
lot
stuff like
different
this, you know,
than
in the
other people
newspaper.
under the
I think we
city
get on the
code.
commission.
Probably.
The kid's like,
All right, so, are we starting with a staff report on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair. What I'd like to do is turn it over to Gary Fuller. Do you want to do the staff report on this? Gary Fuller, who's been working on this project in tandem with Carly Aubrey and Akita Ruzzi. Obviously, it's a big project, so a lot of staff work from a good team goes into it. I'll turn it over to Gary for the staff report.
Thank you. We have scheduled the work session tonight to go over, you know, any items and have a presentation from the applicant as well prior to your public hearing that's being scheduled at this point for July 16th in a couple weeks. And on June 11th, the City Council referred this out formally to boards and commissions. So this special exception amendment of the original approved special exception is now out to all the board and commissions. And the Planning Commission, of course, has a mandatory recommendation to the council. So as you're probably aware, the main changes in the proposed application and the purpose of the amendment is to change the use of the previously approved hotel to a 72-unit age-restricted residential multifamily component. And relative to that, the voluntary concessions have changed, as well as other documents that are related. The studies have been updated to reflect the change from the commercial hotel component to the residential age-restricted component. Thirdly, the other preferred site, architecture, use matters, any request, issues that you may have. Basically, this is a chance to revisit the previous approved special exception, technically. So this application, as I mentioned, is a change in use from the hotel to age restricted. And so the physical built form is relatively unchanged. The building is the same height, the same massing. The layout is relatively unchanged. The footprint's the same. So the building massing, the height is all relatively the same. So the building remains 6 stories or 5 stories over the residential over the ground floor retail. Then appropriate architectural treatments, modifications have been made to reflect more of a residential nature from the commercial. While the hotel, being commercial, did have somewhat of a residential because you had hotel people stay in there, and so it tended to have a little residential flavor already. In regard to the non-physical changes that are included, which are the net revenue of the city, the fiscal impacts, the reduction in commercial, and the ratio has been reduced down to 17.5% and 82.5% respectively. So these, as well as impacts associated with parking, traffic, studies were updated to look at those. And actually, they all generally show a neutral or a slightly improved projected traffic volumes, or in terms of reductions are down. The parking there's a reduction in the request to reduce it overall, I should sort of. And so, these are all reflected in these updated studies. In looking at the application itself, the application materials, were provided in the package for you. And once again, the two legislative actions before you is, the rezoning and the comp plan amendment was previously done. So that's sort of carrying forward. And what we're looking at is allowing residential development in a mixed-use project for one special exception. And the second is for up to 30 feet of height bonus, which is up to 85 feet in this case. And this is, the height is the same as the last special exception, so that really hasn't changed. In looking at, where we've been of late, there was a June 11th city council meeting, and they raised a number of comments and questions and so forth, and they're listed in your staff report on line 134 through 153. And then there was, prior to that, there was a June 4th work session that focused on net fiscal revenues and modeling and real estate related questions to the theater and the hotel use that wasn't viable. And so we had a consultant come in, and so the council had that work session prior to that June 11th meeting. And then back in May 21st, you remember, there was a joint meeting in terms of a work session between the City Council and the Planning Commission, and we went over this application at that time. So generally, the voluntary concessions are one of the things to focus on. Basically, what they're doing is reflecting the use change. The applicant has done some updates. There's a May 16th version that was summarized from line 254 to 266. And there was 3 key areas where the ADUs were basically increased to reflect the additional multifamily with the age restricted. And then the hotel use, the clarification on the shuttle service and the lead, and what was happening with the new residential component versus what was being done with the hotel. And then the age-restricted residences in voluntary concession 7, they talked about the switch from LEED to the National Green Building Standard on that. Then additionally, on June 4th, there were additional 8 voluntary concessions that have come out of the discussions to date. And so those are reflected in your staff report between line 274 and 293. Just to wrap up, the fiscal impact, the original run for it had a range of 1.2 to 2 million, and based on the current model run and updates of the model, the range is up to 2 million, which is basically equal to what the original run was on the original approved special exception, but the base of that range has increased. So it was 1.2 before, now that base is 1.7. So so the revenues are essentially the same with the substituting out of the hotel and adding in the age restricted based on the modeling.
Hey, Gary, was that partially due to a change in how the number of students produced by the apartments was calculated?
Yeah, it was the same way that we had applied it at the Insight project.
Sure. No, I think it's appropriate to apply it that way. I'm just saying, is there an analysis that shows, using the same formula in both cases, the difference in fiscal impact between a hotel and the age restricted? You see what I'm saying?
In terms of the...
Well, to compare the floor.
So the apples to apples piece there?
With either model, because I'm just, like, someone asked me, is age restricted apartments better than a hotel financially? I'm like, I don't know, because we changed the formula.
Yeah, I think the formula, in terms of, we have better information based on the
I guess to
current mixed-use projects.
If we took our
and
current
cities.
information and applied project with the hotel, what would the floor be?
So,
It wouldn't be 1.2, right? Because we would use, there'd be fewer.
yeah, I mean, we did the opposite of that, where we took and did the base model run, and we applied without the hotel and added the age restricted in, and that's the apples to apples comparison
Okay.
that we ran in May of 2017, and then we did an update of that a year later, because this application basically went on hold, and so the figures there showed a reduction still, but based on the really better accurate information on the student, and this is still conservative on top of it, so.
Sure.
Yep. Then, just to wrap up on line 356, there's a summary of some issues and considerations, and the topics are architectural, then the mid-block crossing, as well as special exception conformance. There was some differentiation in the original general approved plan on the gross retail that was required. Is about a 5% reduction in that, and then the office component is about 7% reduction in that. While that's a small number, those numbers didn't add up at the end of the day as we're looking at them now. So, and the staff recommendation on that is either, add those commercial square footages back in, or ask for it as part of this amendment. So that was our thoughts on that. So at this point, the schedule, as I had mentioned, is a public hearing being advertised for July 16th for the Planning Commission. So we have the work session tonight. City Council would receive the Board and Commission comments by the end of July, and then have a work session, follow up on that on August 6th. And then they have a public hearing scheduled on this mid-August on the 13th. And at the same time, Carly's going to touch on it now, that the site plan was submitted a year ago with the application. So we've been working through that, and we've done 2 rounds of reviews on that. And that site plan is reflecting this special exception amendment. So it's always reflected that change all the way through. And so we've been working on that. Once the council takes final action, based on that disposition, the site plan would be scheduled subsequently after that for final public hearing in terms of the Planning Commission.
So that could go quickly because you've spent a whole year chipping away at it.
Basically, yes. Yeah, it's well advanced into its final stages. I mean, in other words, the long list of items has been reduced, and it's a chance tonight to sort of see where we are. You can see how advanced it is and ask any questions, and that's the beauty of having both the special exception amendment tonight and the details of the site plan available to you. And then, we still have some more time before the site plan comes back to you, but the special exception amendment is before you now, which is fairly straightforward in terms of, just a use change and the documents that are reflecting that. So, thank you. Carly?
So as Gary mentioned, we've received a second submission of the site plan in February of this year, and that included the hotel switched out with the age-restricted apartments. A lot of the site plan details actually did not change as a result of that. The staff comment letters submitted or prepared in April list a lot of detail-related questions, and I'll just go over the few of the key issues that were raised in that comment letter. The one was architecture, which Gary has already mentioned. It's improved, but some further refinements probably needed in terms of the design and materials. And then the Grove Avenue speed tables, pending approval of the SC, coordination will be needed between city staff and the consultant, the applicant, to determine the best locations for those speed tables. In regards to the eastern building facade art, the applicant's been requested to start the collaborative community format and process to determine what kind of artwork will go on those at that location. Setback clarification in the VCs should be from base of curb, which is actually what the code says. The VCs right now say back of curb. So they have proposed that in the current update of the voluntary concessions. And then, obviously, they'll need final approval of the special exception amendment before we will schedule a site plan final public hearing before you guys. So then the other key item that's come up, it was in the letter, staff comment letter, but it's become more of an issue lately, is the proposed crosswalk at the intersection of Northwest Street and Grove Avenue. Planning staff has provided that that crosswalk should be maintained, shown on the plan. It was included on the conceptual development plan and listed in the voluntary concessions, and it is also consistent with the city's streetscape standards for spacing of crosswalks approximately 250 feet. The Department of Public Works has concerns over the location, given the curve of that intersection, and believes it might pose a hazard for pedestrians using that crosswalk. So we are asking for guidance on the Planning Commission as to keeping that crosswalk there or not. So with that, I'll turn it to the applicant for a presentation, or Planning Commission for comments at this time.
Well, let me just highlight a few things, and then we'll turn it over to the presentation. So we were involved in May at this joint City Council Planning Commission meeting, and we brought up we, along with the City Council at that meeting, brought up a bunch of areas where we had some concerns with. It sounds like from the staff that some of those items have been addressed, but not all of those. So as you give your presentation, can you please highlight those areas that we discussed on, I think it was May 21st?
Absolutely.
And then, yeah, real focus on that, because otherwise we heard the presentation, and I don't need to hear it again.
He said not till afterwards. Yeah, absolutely, actually.
Oh, if I could,
Sorry.
just before we start, Mr. Chair, I do want to let you know that Jason Widstrom from the city's Department of Public Works is here in case questions do come up about the crosswalk or any other items related to engineering.
Okay, all right, well then,
Great.
please proceed.
Well, thank you for having us this evening. Thank you, Gary, Carly, and the rest of city staff for all your help. Just like you requested, as you can tell on the slide, I just wanted to touch on really the updates that we have discussed with our boards and commissions in various meetings over the last 6 weeks. It's been a very busy 6 weeks, but we're proud of what we've accomplished, how this has evolved. We had a very successful, I think, we had a great turnout, rather, at a town hall meeting, public town hall meeting last week, where we met with citizens and council members alike and had about a 3.5-hour session with them that I think was really productive for all involved. I do have my team here, so just real quickly, I have Will Johnson with Wells & Associates, Eric Lehman and Ingrid Maroney with WDG Architecture, and Antoinette Isherwood with Walter Phillips. So the team is here to answer your questions as we go through this. I'll be honest, I'm going to try to be fairly quick going through my section of this. I'd like to really let the design team speak about the changes and the discussions that we've had throughout the site plan process, and since you've last seen this. But if you do have questions on the movie theater, the restaurant, anything I don't happen to touch on here, I'm an open book, so feel free to ask. The fiscal impact model run, I'm not going to touch much on this, as Gary already has. These points, I think, have been made. We did go present these facts and figures before the Economic Development Authority last week. They recommended to approve unanimously. I think these are public numbers that, again, we feel are conservative, but it's ultimately what the city staff has arrived at. And I mean, as you can see from the numbers, it is projected to be the highest net annual revenue per acre of any mixed-use development in Falls Church by a healthy margin. This is our timeline. Again, this is the timeline as we sit here today that we've been sharing with everyone. It would require the amendment approval on August 13th and subsequent Planning Commission approval on the 20th. If that were to happen, because of how we have our financing lined up, because of how diligently the design team has worked, how quickly staff has worked on site plan, we would be able to begin construction, we believe, in September, or at least early fall. That's how the rest of the schedule plays out over the course of the next 4 years, 3.5 years, rather. Here are some exhibits. So this is where we're going to start talking about things that have been brought up at boards and commissions, and I apologize. I don't remember specifically between 521 and today, but one of the healthy focuses was on public spaces. How are public spaces going to be treated? Our landscape architect couldn't be here. He could talk much more eloquently about this than I can, but I will do my best. This is an exhibit highlighting outdoor dining areas, potentially where they could be located. That's shown in the yellow around the perimeter of the building. This is our merchandising plan that you're looking at. This merchandising plan was created not in a vacuum, but over the course of the last couple years in conjunction with JBG, the retail firm who's our broker, Street Sense, who's a retail advisor, and WDG and other retail architects. So from a design, a programming, and a marketing perspective, this has all been really well thought out. As you can see, we are striving to create a lifestyle environment here, a vibrant mixed-use environment, and we believe that we'll be able to activate the streetscapes, not only from the architecture, but from the actual programming as well, so that this is a gateway to the west end of Falls Church that is vibrant, that is active, and that can entertain a variety of uses. The Market Square.
Interrupt you here real
Yeah,
quick.
of course.
Go back to that slide.
Sure.
One of the things that Mr. Fuller highlighted on is that there's a reduction in ground floor retail.
Yeah.
With all these various services, what is the cause of the reduction?
So that's a great question. Here it is right here. It's generally speaking largely attributed to these areas that we've had to carve out of retail that are technically still only used by retail, but they're not leasable by retail. So these spaces back here, all these back of houses, the loading docks have increased as we've measured for trash, for deliveries. But these back of houses and these loading docks, believe it or not, contribute to about, I think it was 3,500 to 4,000 square feet worth of reduction in rentable area. There was also a mezzanine level to the movie theater. There was, due to outdated logistics and machinery on it, outdated technology that now has been eliminated, but that was only about 1,500 square feet. I'm going plus or minus numbers right here, but that's the reduction in retail. We didn't change, the footprint is fixed. We have not changed any use. We have not expanded the residential into the retail. It's just been the way that design carves things out over the course of the process.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, could I
Yeah,
ask a
sure.
question too?
Of course.
In your terminology there, you're listing all the retail places as fast casual.
Full service, full service.
I know, and the full service there, but does that mean, shouldn't it just be type of retail? Hopefully, we're not going to have, there can't be, possibly be that many fast casual little restaurants.
There truly are a lot of fast casual uses. That is predominantly what's in the market today. This is a plan, though. That's what I
Okay,
keep saying,
okay.
right? Yeah, this is certainly not, set in stone. If this full-service restaurant wants to expand and take over this whole space, we'll allow that. If this all wants to be a full-service restaurant, well, it all just ends up being what's the right tenant for the right space in this project. And that's why we have some very smart people who are, this is their whole life.
And also the fact that, the use of the outside common area is going to be.
You just talking about the Market Square?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
Market Square would be much more with the restaurants and things like that. It seems, again, the fitness probably wouldn't have that much of an outside use.
We've tried to be thoughtful from our design. We've tried to be strategic in our programming. We think we have a very good plan, and we'll see how that turns into execution as we move through the process. But the reality is, and I said this at our 521 meeting, we've had an incredible amount of interest in this site from a variety of retailers. A lot of restaurants, to emphasize the fast casual, but also sales retail, things like gyms, salons, that kind of stuff as well. But we're being very strategic in how we approach retail at this. We have 50% of our retail pre-leased today, which is fantastic going in, which means we have the luxury of not having to be desperate, if you will. We can pick the retailers that really fit the programming here. I did want to touch about the Market Square, though, since you brought that up. This has been a big area of focus. Our big programming goal for Market Square was flexibility. We wanted to ensure that Market Square could be used for a variety of purposes, whether it's performances with local organizations, working with the Falls Church Art Council, concerts, farmers markets. We also want to make sure that on any given day it can be used by families, that you can dine, you can play, you can relax, you can entertain before, after a movie. So that's how this has been built. So, we thought it was important to activate the retail space and the Market Square. This is the heartbeat of what we're trying to build here. This is a space for not just residents, not just the retail patrons, but people from Falls Church to come and hang out, be entertained, and to relax. So we wanted to give them an activated access off of Northwest Street over here. Once you get into the Market Square, this is all a flush paving system. It's a turf lawn. The paving system actually extends over Founders Avenue over here. And the reason we did that is not only to carry Market Square across the street, but on given days for performances, farmers markets, we have the ability of closing off the street here, providing for turnaround, so people can be dropped off and turned around without having to drive through, and then all of this becomes functional, flexible space for entertainment. One of the central focuses that is part of the VCs that we have committed to definitively is the spray ground, which is the water feature. The spray ground is a term I just heard, so I've adopted it, and it is integrated fountain jets, various heights. It can be blocked off if necessary, if at night or in the colder months when we don't want people running through, it's allowed to be. But for the most part, it's meant to be a family-friendly environment. You can sit here, have a glass of wine, kids can play, you can sit on the lawn. That is definitive. So that will be in the VCs. But that's, again, these are all the Market Square elements that I think really separate this project and make it a destination as opposed to just a retail or residential environment. Again, a merchandising plan is somewhat reductive at this point. So the VC update. So here's the net of the VC updates. This remains unchanged from the VCs as they were approved 2.5 years ago. What we did do, though, is we added CPI inflation adjustment language to the VCs so that if this project does delay, the cost will increase for our contributions to these organizations. The net is, it's nominally bigger, but it's roughly the same. The other benefits, though, that we have committed to, Gary touched on a few of these. We committed the affordable dwelling units for the life of the project as opposed to the 20-year commitment that was there before. We felt that was important to council, to commission, to various groups around the city, so we wanted to make sure we fulfilled that. Bike share, we removed the maintenance cap. We will be responsible for the full cost of maintaining the bike share, and that's for the life of the project. I've already touched on the water feature, the spray ground. We will be providing NGBS silver certification for all residential buildings, in addition to the off-site improvements that were included and are substantial, both from a cost figure and from a just a functional aesthetic standpoint, are these off-site improvements.
Can I go back?
Yeah, of course.
On the non-residential component, is there any certification, or is that just going to be built to code?
That's going to be built to code. Yeah, that's a cold, dark shell retail environment from our perspective, so we will build essentially the shell. The tenant's responsibility is to come in and build it out. We are not building that to a energy certification. One thing that I did want to clarify, because this has been a bone of contention, and I've said this at all of our meetings thus far since we've had it clarified, is that it's in our VCs, but more importantly, it's in the federal and Virginia Fair Housing regulations that we are allowed to determine the minimum age for individuals in the 55-year and older building. So I'm not going to try to play lawyer right now. This is the direct quotes out of the federal fair housing legislation. So we can ensure that the age-restricted 55-year and older community does not have an impact on the school system, which is certainly a benefit. And this is being reviewed by the city attorney, along with our fair housing attorney, if there are any further questions. Yes.
Could we have a copy of this?
Of course. Of course. Yeah.
Was
You
it
have
in
the
our
package.
packet?
If you want this is the literal. If you Google that.
Yeah, that.
If you Google that code, it'll pop right up.
Okay.
The language will pop right up. So with that, that's really my clarification in terms of what's been updated from the periphery. I'm going to turn it over to Will now with Wells so he can walk through some of the traffic improvements, because there have been a lot of questions in terms of the traffic. And Antoinette, you may want to pitch in here as well in terms of the crosswalks and whatnot.
Thank you. Again, Will Johnson with Wells and Associates. As most of the commission knows, this site was evaluated extensively with the original SE and rezoning, so it's not my intent to belabor it, but as Joe pointed out, there were some questions, a number of questions raised by the community, so I thought maybe to briefly touch on and kind of revisit a lot of the improvements, that are committed with the site. And, as Gary touched on earlier, just about all of those commitments, remain even with this current SE amendment. This is the existing conditions, really just to point out the number of access points present on the site today. There are 15 total. Those are being consolidated to 3, so access management itself is being drastically improved with the site. And just to briefly walk around, I won't, go through everything, but just to provide some updates going around the site here. At the intersection of Northwest and Park Avenue, as you know, we committed to installing a traffic signal. We did, since approval, submit a signal warrant analysis to staff, and staff has concurred that a signal is warranted there, so that signal will be installed, and in fact, Wells is advancing that design at the moment. Not just this intersection, but also the one down on Broad Street on the eastern end of the site. This signal and the revisions to the intersection will accommodate, pedestrian crosswalks on all four approaches, as well as a realignment of the trail crossing. That was something that we, the staff, and Nova Parks thought was critical with this application, to get that pedestrian crosswalk and the WOD trail crossing at a much safer condition, and to reconfigure that awkward intersection at Park Avenue today. At Grove Avenue, we committed to providing improvements to the WOD trail crossing there. Unlike at West Street, it won't be signalized, but it will be tabled, and it will be neck down, and it will be made more visible. And again, we also committed to provide a mid-block crosswalk on West Street at Grove Avenue, which is this one here. And this is the location that's currently the subject of some internal debate among the staff. But just to, again, point it out, we did commit to a crosswalk there, really to get the Grove Avenue pedestrians across into the site. There is a refuge island in the middle there for the purpose of making it safer and to try to slow vehicles down around that curve.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Since you're going over the traffic part of it, where is the bike share located?
Bike share will be located on the north side. This is
Okay.
where the proposed location is, but that'll
Okay.
work with city staff.
Okay, I was just looking at as far as the crosswalks and accessibility and
Yeah, it's
things like
closer
that.
to the trail.
Yeah, we
Thank
thought
you.
it'd be important to locate it by the WOD trail. Over here, again, we are providing capacity improvements. We are providing an additional lane on southbound West Street. There are 2 lanes today. We're providing a third. We are realigning the crosswalks here to make them more typical of current standards. We are providing a short left turn lane into the Wells Fargo site. And again, because of the removal of all these current access points, we do believe that this will be a much safer condition in the future than it is today. And then lastly, the intersection out here at the east site, we did commit to the installation of a traffic signal. Staff concur that signal is warranted. We are providing a dedicated left turn lane on Broad Street into the site. And again, this actually came out of discussions with the commission several years ago, who believed that a left turn lane would be a very good idea out here, and we were able to accommodate it within the section of West Broad, as well as providing a crosswalk over West Broad Street. This will be signal controlled. They'll have the push button with the countdown head.
What's the spacing on that to West Street?
I can dig that number up for you. I want to say it's around 500 feet, but don't quote me on that. I'll look that up for you.
Do you have to work as far as the timing with VDOT on that timing of that signal with the West Street signal?
It's it'll be city maintained, city controlled, but I think, we'll need to work with staff on, what that timing would be. But I would anticipate coordination, some amount of coordination between the two. And I'll also point out, too, that this is a right in, right out. There will be a raised meeting here, so that will improve the access management, because there currently is a little slip left in today around this location.
The edge of the crosswalk is about 460 to the center of the intersection.
I'm sorry?
It's about 460 feet to the center of the intersection, to the edge of the crosswalk.
Okay, so I was 40 feet off, okay. So, and just to, again, recap the transportation benefits, the beyond the row intersection improvements that I just went over describing, we are looking at traffic calming, as Gary mentioned earlier. We did commit to traffic calming along Grove Avenue, pending, coordination, and the best locations for that. I talked about access management, reducing the number of access points and making them more operationally efficient, increase pedestrian connectivity, including the WOD trail. We are committed to providing a bus shelter along West Broad Street, and the site will employ a number of programmatic on-site elements, including TDM, parking management, including a parking reduction that we're seeking in conjunction with this site plan, accommodations for on-site bicycle parking, as well as the bike share station, which was mentioned previously. And then the shuttle, again, there was some discussion. The previous VCs did commit to a specific hotel shuttle, but there was also another provision for a shuttle for the residents. So we're taking the hotel shuttle off, but the residential shuttle still remains in the concessions. And then finally, I think it bears repeating that the proposed adult housing it generates fewer vehicle trips than the previously approved hotel. So despite the reduction in trip potential, we're still maintaining our transportation commitments from before.
Before we go off this, could we go back to the place where we're, couple slides back?
Sure.
Yeah, that's fine. To staff. Has the city looked into anything they've, and I'm going to use a descriptive, the stupid sign that says no right-hand turn right there at the corner of Grove and West from the hours of 4 to 6, which makes no earthly sense to me at all.
We had explored that early in the special exception process, and I think we had talked amongst staff, and one of the people we had reached out to is actually Major Rick Campbell in the city's police department.
Yeah.
And he was actually around, I think, when that sign was installed, and I think that was done as a traffic calming measure to deter people from using Grove Avenue to come off of Haycock Road and down into...
As a cut through?
Yeah. And so I think after talking to the neighborhood, the intention was
Oh, I
to
break the
leave
law
that-
all the time on that one, sorry.
It looks like it's in the bushes.
It is so annoying. And because, I'm often turning into Wells Fargo. But, yeah, it did make more sense not to have any left turns in that time frame, because that is such a busy
Did the
coming
police
out of.
enforce that? I mean, they
I was
actually,
gonna say.
did they enforce that sign?
They do. Actually, while we were out meeting with the neighborhood, I think I've seen them enforce it a couple. I'm seeing
I
some
don't-
head shakes in the audience.
I don't know.
I have seen them enforce it. I can't say that they enforce it at
There's
all
no
times.
sign exempting like local residents. So if you live a few houses up and you want to
Yeah,
go,
right.
leave your house and go there. I mean, technically you're not supposed to do that for those hours, which is probably not
I think
really
they probably do it
practical.
random. We have the rules on Roosevelt that you can't use it to get to the metro, basically. And so they come out like
What are
once a
residents
month and
accepted?
pull people over, but they don't
Right.
do it every day.
And I realize they're right. They can't sit out there every day. That wouldn't be practical. either,
Yeah.
but,
Right.
I don't. Well, I guess if you've looked at it, I don't know.
But
It's
I
still
can see
something
the
that-
reason for it, definitely,
Yeah.
with Broad Street.
And also, you have to have a place to pull them over. We have the cemetery. They'll pull over 8 cars at a time in the cemetery.
We haven't seen. I haven't received a lot of requests to change it, and so
I was just wondering if they were
absent
gonna.
that, I
Yeah,
don't
the
know
neighbors
that
aren't
there's been a real
clamoring to change
conversation.
it. I guess I don't know. We
No.
shouldn't
No.
monkey with it,
Okay,
but-
just thought I'd ask. Make sure I get out of school at 3:30, to scoot down there.
I'm going to turn the. Oh, sorry. I'm going to turn this over now to Eric to walk through more specifically the architecture, where we have samples that you guys can touch, see. So Eric is our design guru. He can walk you through all of this. Do you want to do the presentation or the animation first?
Let's just do this.
Okay, cool.
Hey, good evening. Eric Liebman. Last time I did this was a year and a half ago, so we're making progress. Just real quickly, this is a scheme we inherited about a year and a half ago, and our main change, I think, was that there was sort of a single architecture for cabaret that kind of pervaded the whole project. We thought it was very important to sort of break down the scale of the project, to be able to sort of create an illusion of incremental growth, to make the thing scale with Falls Church. So within the project, there's a series of different architectures. So we have a triangle building, we have the hotel, which is now the active adult. There's a building A, a building B, separated by a bridge. So even though it's all sort of really like two prime buildings, the architecture will be much more scaled down to, we think, an appropriate scale for Falls Church. There's obviously some important view corridors and view lines, opportunities for branding, for creating hierarchy along not only Broad Street, but also from north and south, which, brings us into the project along Foundry Avenue and coming in from the north. Along Northwest, we see a lot of key points to articulate. So I'm going to take you through about 7 or 8 perspectives. These were done about a few months ago. We also have elevations. The elevations are a little bit more up to date. This is the main corner of our age-restricted building along Broad Street, and kind of heading a little bit farther east, the kind of the front door into our project. along Founders Avenue. And continuing on, this is looking at the project back from the east. We changed this quite a bit recently. There was some criticism, especially from the Architecture Advisory Board, so we increased the amount of brick. The brick is really kind of doing some funky things. One of the challenges of this particular facade is that we can only get like 15% windows on the facade. This is actually maxed out the amount of windows we can put on this end facade due to its proximity to the property line. And over to the right, you can see some of the art at a distance. Again, it's purely illustrative at this point, but that would be where the art would be positioned. Again, a little bit more frontal. Opposite our axis along Founders Avenue, a large marquee, a large branding opportunity, which will provide signage for the overall project. That bridge structure sort of in the distance.
The movie theater would probably be better on that corner now that we don't have the hotel there, but I understand you guys are gonna redo all that. So it's interior. How are you gonna sign that movie theater? Because it's unfindable currently.
Well, this gives you an idea within the project. I don't know if there's
Yeah,
any
no,
questions.
that's a great question. That came up, one of our boards and commission, I can't remember which one, and we discussed this for a while. So there will be a large marquee on the interior of the project. Whether we sign it from the outside coming in is kind of up to, as we work with city staff on a comprehensive signage package, we'll talk through that. What I will say is that if you go to Angelica at Mosaic, there isn't signage as you're coming down Gallows Road.
But it's visible. Once you're in Mosaic, around the ugly Target building,
Sure.
you can totally see
Oh,
the frontage.
and this will be, this.
No, I understand
that-
it's visible inside there, but
Uh-huh.
like it's invisible from the major drive-through road.
Sure. So we are still refining our comprehensive signage package, all of our wayfinding. So is it possible that we put a building mounted sign, SMG, here? I think it's a conversation we need to have as a design team, but this comment just got brought up last week, so I think it's definitely a fair comment.
It has to go through the architect.
Well, I think it's a comment that is based on the market and success of this thing.
Sure.
It's for people to know it's there.
Sure.
And even if you have GPS, people want to see a clue they're going to the right place.
Sure.
I'm the whole Angelica is not like on the interior of an enclosed area like that. There's a major drive road on both sides of it.
No, completely understood.
Is the bridge going to contain apartments?
Bridge contains
Yes, ma'am.
apartments, right. And kind of turning around, so obviously you're seeing internally the theater marquee, looking over the plaza. There are some changes on the brick facade to the right, the red brick facade, that we've actually placed our amenity space for the apartment building. You see where the entrance, it says NEK, it shouldn't say that. That's the main residential canopy. So above that, there will be amenity spaces, which we'll look at in our elevations. That's has been updated. Kind of looking at the project from the north.
Yes, from Park and Northwest, yes.
It's almost 10 o'clock. I knew that an hour ago. So again, you can see how the project begins to step down toward the east, toward the townhouses. So we're very cognizant of the fact that we're trying to scale this thing from a kind of a 6-story reading down to a 3-story reading. Again, the bridge becomes the centerpiece. Our triangle building to the right has a certain architecture. Then to the left it's something else. So again, we're trying to sort of clarify and really break down the scale of the project. Kind of that same view, looking at a little more detail as the building steps down toward our townhouse
So
expression.
is the intention of that piece towards the back, again, that's going to have some kind of art on it? Is that?
So that's going to have some art on it. We actually, I don't think I brought it, but yeah, that's the back of the movie theater. So the idea is that it's a fiber cement wall that we've broken up. So the darker part is currently how the art would be broken up. And rather just having one continuous work, the idea was that we're trying to pick up on the rhythm of the architecture. So So we're sort of following, I guess it's like 24 foot on center, the bays below, and we're sort of picking that above. So the notion being is that the art will be contained. Obviously, this might evolve as an architect is.
Will we have actual graphic drawings or pictures or something of what the art's gonna be at site plan?
So we have had conversations with city staff, and we are not going to have that at site plan. We are going to have a collaborative
I'm very
approach.
uncomfortable with that then. I need
Okay.
something, some actual, some idea of what that art looks like, otherwise I'd rather not have art.
Well, actually, what we talked about, since they weren't prepared right now to do it, is it'd be a site plan amendment. And
Okay.
it would be a community outreach, and then they would design the wall on the St. James
Correct.
side as well. So
Right,
so the idea is you would have it as a complete review, but would be more of a community outreach than what we're going,
And then who would determine what it looks like then, based on the community outreach?
well, you would have the final word on it.
So it would come back to us and we would
It would
determine
be
the
a
art at
site
that
plan
point?
amendment to this site
Okay.
plan.
I guess it just concerns me because then we have a site plan on a material, which may or may not work for the art that we end up doing, or if we end up, I don't know, it's just concerning to me. I hope the material works well for whatever's determined.
But you can't see that facade from Park Avenue.
That's one thing. Is that in here, the view line?
I don't think that section is in here, or
It was on your earlier one.
It was, we
Avenue though?
we did do a section where if you're standing in the sidewalk across the street, you really cannot see that projection up above the townhouses at all.
It's at the end of your elevations. You'll see that.
Oh, is it in there? We'll get to that.
As to public art, we're still
Wasn't there.
working on a public art policy too.
Yeah, so on the townhouses, what's the grade material? Do you have that over there? What, the grade material that seems to be every other townhouse?
These.
Yeah,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
we're
Get there? Okay.
we're gonna get there. Everything is here. There's a ways to go.
Okay.
And this is our triangle building, so we have red brick building with kind of a base middle on top.
I like the open space system.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yes.
This is the crosswalk in question.
It is. So the most up-to-date stuff are these elevations, and we're actually gonna keep blowing up these elevations, showing materials, so bear with me. The one on top is the, kind of the internal elevation looking east, along Founders Avenue, so, let me just keep typing here. And the one on the bottom is sort of a cutaway, it's a Broad Street elevation, we've eliminated the age-restricted building, so we're kind of looking through it and looking at that triangle building, one building kind of back from the street. So kind of looking at a little more detail along Broad Street. Again, sort of a rich red, dark red brick building with bay expressions. The rhythm is very much as has sort of always been in the original approvals. Retail below, we have where Street Sense is doing a series of guideline documents, but not knowing what the retail is going to be, we've kind of illustrated, but the notion here is that the retail will all be framed. So essentially, the glass portions will be by others, the color of the sign bands will be by others, but that level of detail will sort of be ensured. We wanted to make sure that we sort of built in a structure roughly at 30 foot on center that gives some sort of inherent character. I think we found too often that if we open just one large space, a lot of times, we're pretty disappointed at the quality we get. So, especially along Broad Street, we're trying to encourage the retailers to do something with a lot of character. So this project has sort of a deep kind of burgundy red brick and a dark gray brick. These colors are pretty evocative of the old Falls Church. Again, you guys can look at the stuff later on. We have it all here. I also wanted to sort of talk about one more thing. Typically, every unit is going to have some through-the-wall venting. So each one has a single vent for a dryer vent and a toilet vent. So we found the most discreet way to do that are these, I think they're roughly like 7 7-inch by 7-inch metal vents. So they stay closed. They're painted out to match the brick color, so that's about the most discreet way to
Have
do
you
it.
considered shiny metal ones?
Really, we were really
Like
impressed with
mirrors,
those. I
chrome?
think you heard our request big time.
I did miss, but we, there are favorites too, but I think this is actually the most discreet way to do it, we have found. So that's a pretty typical condition. There's a lot of detail here. We've been asked to sort of
Yeah,
do
about the
sections through
white.
things. All the
Or is that the
dimensions of
gray?
this will be
That's-
available, but we just wanted to sort of clarify, there's a lot of ins and outs. These bays are coming out 3 feet, but I think everything is, we have a lot of small cornices. The gray material is a fiber cement panel. We've detailed it sort of 2 different ways throughout the project. Sort of the bays have a series of battens. They're sort of a 1x4 battened, and then on top, it's more of a reveal detail. So again, to create a little variety, we have both on this job. And then kind of this is that internal facade along Founders Avenue. So again, the main residential entry down sort of to adjacent to the theater, right? Oh, you got that pointer, yeah. And up above, that's all the amenity space. So again, it's all framed by brick, but again, we really think it's going to be really exciting to have the internal life of the apartment building sort of facing out onto the plaza. And likewise, from within, they get to share the excitement, looking out on the plaza. So we think that becomes sort of a very exciting way to kind of intensify the
And those look to be a fairly light color in
What-
in the
what?
window space.
the windows themselves.
No, you have the windows, are those divided windows?
All the
Right,
windows.
Right.
Yeah, right. So
The frames of the windows are light color.
there are, yeah, they're frames, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but they're like,
You're saying the color of the metal framing?
Are the
Metal,
metal frames
okay,
of the
me-
windows gray, or what color? are
They're,
they?
they're, the windows, the storefront windows are metal. Most of the punch windows are gonna be vinyl. All the colors are here. I can share them with you. So again, we've tried to have different colors to match here. Those are kind of a metallic gray. We have like 5 different colors to try to be in concert with the brick.
So where's the vinyl paneling being used that the AAB had a problem with?
I don't,
I don't.
they didn't say anything.
Well, in the minutes that we got from AAB, they said reconsider the use of vinyl siding within the courtyard at the southeast portion of the property.
I don't think we had vinyl on the southeast, did we? Oh, maybe on the lower?
No, within the courtyards, we'd be considering some, we're not sure, but no, none of the main facades have
Okay, but I'm
any
just going through the
any
AAB
vinyl.
notes, and
Right.
I didn't recall that coming up.
it's in their written notes I have right here.
We've actually reduced that.
There's a
out.
bullet point.
And again, we have a lot of Juliet balconies. We have, our predominant balcony is a Juliet type. We have some full balconies, but again, we have many more balconies than the original project. We think that adds a lot of life and animation on the project, and again, more sections that overlook onto the plaza. It's about 10 foot deep. The dark gray brick is rusticated. Looking at our triangle building and the bridge in more detail. Again, the triangle building is a lighter red brick. All the buildings, their bases, we have kind of again of a variety of oversized masonry or cast stone. We're sort of continuing on, and I think we're trying to share that with everybody, and we're pretty open to input. But again, Falls Church has a pretty eclectic mix of colors, and to sort of give each building character, we have a pretty great range too. But probably the 2 most predominant colors are the dark red and the lighter red, and then our other bricks have a lot of blending, which I'll show you in a second. But again, there's a strong feeling of a building base, middle, and top. You see retail sign bands down there, branding opportunities at the top. Again, looking again in more detail again more of.
What's the material for the balcony?
The balcony, again, that is a Juliet balcony. It's a mesh, it's a metal mesh, like a
Okay.
2x2 metal mesh.
Who's that supposed to be up there?
That's a placeholder.
Our guy?
Yeah, that's one of the founders.
Founder. That's, I think it's George
tell
Mason.
me.
I think it's George, is that George Mason?
Yeah.
I don't know. That's that, yeah, those will evolve, yes. All right. This is the same on the bottom, the same elevation to the left, though. We have the AR building now, and on top, we have the view from the east. So looking at that view from the east in a little more detail, this is kind of turning the corner. We thought it was really critical that the side elevation, the front elevation, it's much more of a corner building. So this building, again, the idea is a blended brick. I have the brick samples here. We began to feel that it might be a little bit too gray, so we've been working, and again, at our next meeting, we'll have more samples again to make that color a little bit warmer, not quite as gray, but I think the notion of blending bricks sort of adds a lot of inherent character to a project, as opposed to something which is too monochromatic, so we're doing that here. The setback areas are more fiber cement panels. Again, the lines are 1x4 battens. We've greatly increased the amount of brick on these facades and created some stepping. Perhaps the area of concern was sort of the area which is sort of deeply shadowed. That's sort of a pretty deep courtyard, which we're still, I think, evolving what that is. I think we're looking at a collaborative look, whether it is vinyl or like a hardy panel. I don't think that's 100% resolved yet.
Maybe, I don't know.
Is that maybe what they were referring
That
to?
was probably what they're referring to. That's
think
deeply
so.
recessed.
Right, that's probably back like,
Well,
100
they
feet
just
at
felt
that
like
point.
the vinyl siding didn't have a place in this type of
Right.
construction. And the way it looks.
Yeah, no, understood. I think we've tried to restrict it mainly to areas that are only for the residents, and where they're off of the main facades. And
I definitely feel like this whole section, although it is broken up because it's all kind of in the same shade, just kind of, it's bland. It's just really bland. I don't know if, I almost feel like, I know you were like talking about taking it warmer, but I almost feel like some of it should be darker, something, because otherwise it just looks, I mean, I don't know if it's always hard to tell when you go from sketch to reality, but as this looks like a prison to me.
well,
You can only get really 15% glass, so that, I think there's a great
I'm fine
challenge
with the
here,
glass,
but.
I'm talking about the coloration.
No, I know, I understand, okay.
we've taken that. I mean, we've heard the criticism on this side, right?
Okay.
And it was very monochromatic. What we've tried to do is,
Okay,
to
that's a
your
good
point,
term.
is to vary up the pattern on this brick facade. So you can see it. I don't think the elevation is capturing necessarily the variety. I think the brick pattern more at the bottom captures it, which will be much bolder in person than it is up on screen.
I mean, the color is terribly faded on the screen, I'm sorry, but,
Is
but
that
again,
the
it's
yellow
a
that
little
you're
bit
gonna use
challenging.
Right there, right?
Yeah, there's some yellow, there's some grays, there's some browns.
So the idea is a fairly rich blend, but again, it's these things.
But yeah, I mean, we hear your point. We've tried to, again, maximize the glass as much as possible while including in a variety, so it isn't so
I'm
monochromatic.
fine with the glass. I think you've put in quite a bit of glass. Glass is not my problem. My problem is the material mix and the colors.
Oh, my.
I did. I just wanted to
No
escape for a
worries.
second and get, no, I
There you go.
did it on purpose. I didn't expect the thing to totally
There you go.
die.
Okay.
I want to get back to the perspective, because I
I can just keep going through the
okay,
elevations
yes,
and we can
yes,
return
okay,
to later.
all right. So again, our Park Avenue elevations, and West Street, and
But you look at that and how much more attractive that is with some broken up colors
Right.
going on.
But don't forget, these are street elevations. The other one is a property line elevation. You're going to be walking perpendicular to it. You're not, it's not a frontal street
But what's
elevation.
not, next door to you is not a big building that's blocking that view.
We totally understand. That is a perspective that as you're
Yeah.
entering the building from the
Even if-
west, that's a
even
gateway
if,
to the building.
We had this problem with the Hilton Garden Inn.
Right, right.
Where the interior wall that faces, you know, was now the Kensington Inn, but for at the time it was a Burger King, so it was totally visible. And there wasn't much there, but we had to break it up a little bit, just so that during that time period that was totally visible, it wasn't.
And
So,
the south wall of Harris Teeter.
and your
Mhm.
wall's always gonna be visible, because the church
Yeah.
is never gonna build a big building there.
Sure.
So, even if it's just wrap the corners a little bit and have a little bit more fun on those
Sure.
corners.
No, it's a good
You
comment.
know, because
Yeah.
once you get in the middle of it, you're right, it's not that visible, there's big trees there
Yeah.
on their side. But just the corners.
Yeah. No, understood. As you know, this is a comment that has come up. We are evolving this design and trying to do what we can to, you know, really maximize the variety and.
This made me
our
think of
concept on
Hogwarts or something dark.
it. Hogwarts is great, so.
I don't like Hogwarts, but
That shouldn't be an insult.
I'm sorry.
No.
Where
I
are
like
the-
Minas Tirith and
Where
Lord
are
of the
the
Rings.
entrances for the Park Avenue apartments?
So the entrance is, Erica, you can clarify, but it's right there.
Okay.
That's the lobby.
And those are horizontal, not vertical? The apartments?
These are apartments, so this is like one apartment right here.
Yeah, right, they're horizontal.
They're just
apartments.
traditional
Right,
apartments.
Right,
Yeah, they look like townhomes, it's 3 stories.
right.
traditional
And that's the
apartments.
way the back end of Spectrum is too, with
Yes.
the business townhouses back there. They're not really townhouses, they're horizontal spaces.
And we have worked with staff quite a bit, Eric, and the design team to really refine, and I think this has come a long way, especially over the last 2 years, both the design, the front lawn, how this integrates with the neighborhood.
So all the townhouses are pretty discreet. We've used we repeated the 3 colors, the dark burgundy color from Broad Street, the red building from the Triangle building, and then the same color from our prison building. We've
Monochromatic, we came up with that term.
that last brick, when we get that mock-up, you'll.
Prison won't have that many windows, so it's not a prison.
I
windows
promise.
for prison.
So again.
The new prison that was built out near front wall is more attractive than that wall.
Oh dear.
Whoa, yay.
Because it's all red brick.
Yeah, tough crap. It's getting
Let's
late
just
here.
keep going through it, and then we can go back to that.
It had more.
And again, a close one to the townhouses, we have cast stone detailing on these, and, you know, we have
think that's
soldier
great.
courses. Soldier courses pretty typically throughout the project, sort of indentations and projecting bays, again, at a fiber cement panel with battens.
Pretty, I like that. I just thought you needed some
you.
encouragement somewhere along the line.
No, I think that side is very attractive.
And also, when you had it back on that other view of the Park Avenue, when you had the wall that was up for the setback to the theater, that actually looked pretty. You had some yellow design up in there.
And she liked
stuff.
the art sample.
That's the art, and actually, there's a picture, there's a perspective I think that you'll see up here where honestly, you're not even going to be able to see that wall from Park Avenue because of the elevation difference.
Right.
So it's there, but
But it looked.
you're going to need a drone
pretty
to
in
see
that
it.
rendition.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Well, the question
You're welcome.
Should we have art there if it's not really visible?
It's meant to carry around the corner. That's something we can talk about certainly in the amendment
Yeah,
process.
I mean, there might be some other treatment that would work just as well.
So again, this is the active adult building. This building has a blend of, it's, we don't have a mock-up yet, but we're blending two bricks. Come over,
I have to say,
look
I am
later.
not a fan of these bricks. I would much rather have like a warm brown version.
Staff love these bricks.
Well, I understand you love them, but I do not love them. And
Your
most of the people I've talked to in the neighborhood do not love them. Yellow brick, not, like, maybe if you could mix it in with like a darker brownish yellow, something I don't know. Like, as it currently stands, I have not heard of one person, I don't know, maybe one of you guys like it, I don't know. But I haven't heard one person who likes the yellow.
You got yellow bricks in some of the other places.
I know, and it's not attractive. It's on the back of the Harris Teeter.
I'm just listening, sorry.
Taking notes.
Okay.
Well, that's one of the biggest comments I've gotten from citizens has been on the architecture.
Okay.
So, just passing it on.
And again, just more details of,
That's
so,
very
so,
pretty.
so it's a combination of our
See, I like that.
Our,
the
our
window
blended
design.
brick up to that cornice line. It's, those horizontals are a cast stone that isn't fiber cement, it's fiber cement, at the top level.
But I like those windows a whole lot.
The material that's kind of like cross sections, is that also fiber cement?
Where?
This stuff or this stuff?
That,
Yeah,
that-
that right there.
no, that's a cast stone.
Is it the cast iron? Okay.
Right.
I just want to make sure I
I
understand the
like
difference. I like that too.
And we have single hung windows there, and I think that's about it.
Yeah. So there. So we don't have
That's
the
like good.
we don't have the perspective from the sight line, but I do think it's in some supplementary
Could you
materials
hold
here.
up those samples?
Oh, gosh. I can bring them around.
No, just even holding them up. It's better to look at them from a little distance anyway.
You know, so this is the brick which you don't like, which the idea is that
See,
we're gonna
it's-
replace these bricks with a much warmer brick. Again, I think it's the blender bricks that give a great deal of character as
It
opposed to
doesn't look that bad.
monolithic.
There, again, the picture probably washed it all out.
These two bricks, you don't like the colors. I really wouldn't call these yellow bricks. We think they're really quite rich and bright, and I think when they're blended
They look
together,
goldish
and if,
yellow.
but I think you really need to look at a larger
For people
panel
behind
with
your head that live
with.
near this, that are shaking their head right now. Not a fan of your bricks.
I think you need to be patient and look at a mock-up with mortar and really look at the bricks laid in, because
And it's up.
I think you might have a very different perception.
Well, we did have someone use that lighter color brick. It's on the back of the Harris Teeter building, for example, and I don't like it on the building.
No, understood. And one of the things that we are juggling, as you can imagine, with architecture, is a variety of opinions, where we're trying to stick with what was initially approved while evolving it in a direction that satisfies most, with the understanding we can't satisfy all. So that's what we're trying to do right now. I know that Eric is anyways, we take the opinions very seriously, and we're doing what we can to address concerns, both in architecture and throughout the project.
But the
Well, you know, like
basic
you just said,
design
like-
really looks good.
Yeah.
This view right here, I've not heard no one's told me they had, and I like it. I mean, so I'm saying there's lots of good pieces in there.
Thanks.
But the lighter brick that you're seeing there is the same brick that we're gonna be using on the other side.
Yeah, and I think it's because
At the
it's
end
broken
elevation,
up.
it looks right.
It's broken up more with other colors.
We can certainly we can talk about how to incorporate more variety into that corner to figure
But
out,
the
what we're able
windows
to do.
really are pretty.
Yeah, no, the
I'm a
windows and
window
the-
person.
The stone, all of that was really nice. I just think it's just too much of the, whatever color you want to call that. We're not saying yellow, gold, whatever. It's too much of it. And on the other end, it's just too gray. And I'm not saying you have to do that whole wall, but I just think the corners just need more.
Okay, understood.
All right, thank
Yeah,
you.
of course.
So,
We have a few more questions?
yeah, I think I want to get back into the questions as opposed to just architecture talk. I'll turn it over to you,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Stevens.
Just
Yeah.
a couple of questions. On the NGBS, this is,
Yes, sir.
I don't think we have any familiarity with that here in the city. I'm not
Yes, sir.
aware that we've used that. Do you have a pro forma score sheet?
Yes. So, in fact, I received the preliminary. We have a score sheet. They've requested it for site plan submission.
Yeah.
So I have a user manual that's more description than you need on NGBS. NGBS is an energy certification specific to multifamily. I think I've said that in most meetings, as opposed to LEED, which is a general commercial,
Right.
and it's multifamily, but it's general commercial. NGBS we've used in the district, we've used in Fairfax County, and we're proposing to use it here, obviously. So we have a scorecard that shows our design as planned meets the NGBS Silver certification. It also has a description of what the NGBS Silver certification and what that program means.
Right.
So that will be included in site plan, and I can work with staff to get you all information, ad hoc as you need it. So.
Okay, that'll be good.
And is that
Yes,
still
ma'am.
silver?
Yes.
And are your other projects also just silver as well?
Some of them are just NGBS standard.
Really?
Yeah.
I'm just concerned, on the commercial side of it, what you're seeing with most projects, it's silver's not even considered anymore. It's all
Sure.
gold and platinum.
Sure.
Is there a reason why we aren't doing gold?
So we evaluated this project for NGBS Gold, and to be frank, we have our consultant is Stephen Winter Associates. They're a national green energy program consultant. They've said for our type of product, stick frame, multifamily, residential, NGBS Gold is almost unobtainable. So we did our sincere due diligence, hours of phone calls to figure out how is this practical, and it wasn't.
Of course, if you had a rooftop
Huh?
solar system, that would probably get you there.
That might get you some points. I think that was part of the grab bag of points that we were assuming we could get. Honestly, there was so much that went into it that at the end of it, she said, "I'll be honest, I haven't seen anyone get an NGBS Gold on this type of product." So that informed us.
In the voluntary concessions, you mentioned that you'd provide the name of the accredited verifier of the...
For the NGBS program, that'll be Stephen Winter Associates.
Okay,
Unless they hire, believe Stephen Winter Associates is the verifier themselves. If not, I can get you the name of who does it.
Well, even less concerned about the actual name is whether or not they're affiliated with Mill Creek, or if they're an independent.
No, I can send you information on Stephen Winter Associates or whoever would be the accredited verifier.
Okay.
They're an independent consultant.
All right, thank you. The other question I had to do with the electric vehicle charging stations. I know that you upped the number that you're willing to provide, which is good. Can you put some of the ones that are actually going to be equipped in the public accessible part of the parking lot?
That would be really good.
As opposed to the residential, you mean?
Yeah, so where
Yes.
they wouldn't be available. We had a situation where somebody wanted to come and talk to us a couple of weeks ago, and they had a Volt. And, and they said, where can I plug in my car to? We don't have any publicly available EV
Right.
charge stations in the
None.
city right now.
Yeah,
So,
let me make that note just
Say
to
that.
clarify, but we will make sure those are split
Okay,
between
those with a
residential and
quick
retail,
charge.
both future and present.
And then are your charging, are they the two-sided ones?
Yes.
So
We-
there
I mean,
could
we-
be, one, there's, I hadn't even seen one before until this past week.
That's what we've used in other projects, are the dual stations.
Yeah, right.
We
Those are
haven't,
more or less industry standard.
Right. It looked like two-station gas pump.
And they're a level 2 charger.
Yeah. So they're the faster charger, yeah.
Yeah.
But the more volt, yeah, okay.
And then I just had one question on stormwater, and that's whether or not you're going to meet the requirement of a 20% reduction in phosphorus with on-site facilities.
Yes, so we are meeting, we're meeting 87% of our requirement, but even the portion, we are reducing it by 20%. So we're not using 100% of our requirement on site, but we're meeting 87% of our requirement on site, and that value is more than 20% reduction, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think I see what you're saying. but-
Okay.
All right.
that has been, honestly, that's been one of our large focuses through this second round of site plan submission, is bringing the stormwater management. Our first submission, 0%. We were going to purchase credits for the entirety, and working with the city, we were able to bring that on site. So that's been something we've worked to achieve through this submission process.
Have you found out in any ground testing or anything, or looking at the city maps, are there any tributaries going through that, to the Cove Branch or anything like that?
Going through the site?
Or to the, yeah. 'Cause we have run into some tributaries that are underground that causes more difficulty in the excavation.
Right, not that we know of here, no.
And one other, you done?
Yes, thanks.
Just happen to think, something that often comes up are the HVAC, all the units up on the top of where are they being hidden behind parapets or something like that?
This is probably a better question for the architect to address, but honestly, we concentrate those units towards the center of the buildings along corridors. The reality is, based on the building height and the centrality of those units, you won't see them.
Because we've come up with that problem and a couple of other things,
Like,
that
they're-
neighborhoods were quite
They're
worried.
not going to be perched on the edge of these like Park Avenue homes. They're not going to be perched on the edge along Broad Street. They're going to be located more central, so that you can't be visible.
Anyone else?
Should we talk about that crosswalk?
We would love some feedback.
My main thought is, if you don't put a crosswalk there, people are still gonna cross the street
Right.
there.
What's the debate? What's the problem? I mean, what are the two sides here as
Sounds like the
opposed?
challenge is if you're crossing there and someone's whipping around from Grove onto West, they'll just run you over.
Correct. That's what's been brought up to us. I mean, Antoinette may be able to elaborate on this a little bit more, but that's essentially what's been brought up is the worry that cars coming around the bend on Northwest Street may not be, well, I think it was coming more from north.
Nice.
Well, I think
If-
this,
Oh, I-
because when you're making this turn, you're looking here to make sure these cars aren't gonna hit you. You're not looking that there's gonna be a person there.
And I think the concern also is if you're going north on Northwest Street, so as you come through the intersection, if there's not so much the person coming from Grove Avenue, but a person crossing back over to Grove Avenue, you're not gonna see that person standing at the bend.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen people cross here now. I've seen them run across there quite a bit.
And they're gonna really cross.
And
with
you
a
can
fancy
do it
restaurant thing.
when it's not rush hour. The problem is that rush hour is a lot of times, there's like cars all the way backed into that. And so you're basically, people are crossing around the cars. And so the problem is if, most of the lanes are backed up, but the lane going the other way, people can come through, like as they're going towards Park. And that's, I think, where your concern is, because it's
It
just
just-
not that clear.
Just makes
I,
sense.
the only thing I can think of is if the only way it would work is if we made sure
I know
cars
there's that-
are well back from
There's
it.
that stop bar now that's like kind of drawn there so people don't block the intersection. Is that gonna stay?
Otherwise, you're here for.
So
nothing.
I guess, as we discuss this, I guess my question is, if there isn't a crosswalk there, what do we do to prevent people from crossing there?
They're still gonna cross there.
And we were sketching up an alternative in preparation of our next site plan submission. One of the thoughts was to actually extend like the planter coming around the corner to discourage people from crossing there. I don't know how much that would do.
You have to extend it far and tall, because I mean,
Yeah.
I don't see the sense
I
of
mean,
that at
up
all.
at Seven Corners, they had to build that giant fence to keep people from crossing
And
50.
the bridge
So,
and-
and they eventually built a bridge. So I mean, I'd love
That
to hear what
really
Jason,
makes sense.
Jason probably knows a lot more about this than I do, but I just imagine once you get all these really awesome restaurants, no one's
There's
gonna
an
cross,
island there,
walk up there, cross.
Yeah,
come back
nobody's gonna
They're
walk
gonna run
up
across
there.
But there is a pedestrian refuge, right? There's an
down.
island.
Yeah, well,
there.
that's what I'm wondering, is that,
Is there an island that people can, is that?
There's a refuge, yeah.
Yeah, it's an idea. So what I just handed out, that Internet alluded to, is that sight distance is a concern with the crosswalk as it is currently shown. So the handout shows that, it's 155 feet that you need for stopping distance, which allows reaction time to see the person and the physical ability of the car to stop. I think Paul pointed out to me earlier today, there is maybe another standard that could reduce that, but I still think sight distance is an issue here. And so whether or not we want to clear the way so you can see it a little bit better, it could be an option. Restricting people from crossing here would be another option. I do want to just, from a kind of layman's point of view, think about that intersection today. It's a funky intersection.
Oh,
We
God,
have
yeah.
restrictions at times. There's good volume, so we're going to throw more volume into it and more people into it. And they're magically going to be protected by a crosswalk symbol on the ground. Don't think that's a good idea.
Except that, again, you put the don't turn right sign up there to stop it from turning right. So the question I have is, are we better off having some place to hide in the middle of the street? Or, I mean, people are gonna cross there. How are you gonna keep them from
Yeah,
crossing?
so there are studies that show that putting crosswalks in a bad location will get them more hurt. You'll have a higher incident than if you had no crosswalk at all, because
Because they'll assume a safety, a certain level of safety, because they're in a crosswalk. Where
This
now,
is like the
when they
argument that
run
says
across
that-
it during rush hour, they're freaking out, trying not to get hit.
exactly.
And I think
Are there really studies that show that? Can you bring them? Because that's like the argument, hey, I don't wear a helmet when I ride my bike,
No, but
is then
that
the
makes
cars
sense
are
to
more
me.
careful because they know I'm more
So when
fragile.
you know
It's
you're
like-
jaywalking, you're more careful about it.
But I do
there are
also,
studies that talk about it.
yeah, and this is my personal opinion, but I do also think that there are people who will, if there isn't a crosswalk there, won't feel safe. And I understand there are people who do cross there anyway.
It's a natural
But I
crossing.
think you're going to increase the number of pedestrians that will be using this intersection that is otherwise dangerous by putting a crosswalk
They're
there.
going to anyway, and that's what bothers me. There just is a natural place to cross. You've got also the Grove, with the bike trail crossing up there, on through Grove. But I just don't, and please, don't mention planters in this situation at all. I mean, we've done that, tried that with the 7-Eleven. That wasn't exactly a
That's a
cool
different
thing.
thing.
I know, but please don't even mention
Well,
it.
the difficulty crossing here during rush hour is not the right turners. It's actually people coming off of Broad Street that are heading up West Street.
And they
Because
speed
that's
up.
the lane you can't really see because you are coming between the cars that are backed up for the light. And I mean, I've spent a lot of time in that intersection. I know people. I go to Grove a lot because I know people live there. But so I think that in all good conscience, we really can't put a crosswalk there unless there's stop signs or lights or something. And we can't put those there because it doesn't make sense for
Or
the intersection.
crosswalk
So I don't think I think you're right. Like encourage, because the people I see crossing there know they're in danger, because you can see the way they're running.
But
Well, I
if
mean-
you had the blinking crosswalk sign,
Oh.
I mean, we're doing that all over the
Now,
place
right now, there's
now.
that stop bar that's kind of drawn there, when people queue up during rush hour. It happens for about an hour. I live right there. I live out
Yeah,
west.
right.
So there's every day for about an hour and a half, people in the afternoon, people heading, backs up, heading southbound, and it backs all the way up, sometimes all the way to the trail, or
Oh, yeah.
all the way even to Lincoln on the worst of times. And
Right, up
and
to Lincoln
There's
Light.
there's that stop bar there to try to keep people from blocking that intersection. Is that going to stay?
Don't block the box.
Is that going to remain, that stop bar? There's like a line that's drawn there that sometimes people ignore, sometimes they don't. And right now, there's actually not a huge
Well,
number
most
of people
people
that
do
cross
stop
there.
there because
Yeah, they do when it
I've
backs
done
up
many
enough.
left
There's no
turns out
reason
of
to
Grove
cross now.
The
during
problem
We're
is
gonna
people,
build a reason to
people are more
cross.
backed up to go straight and left, and then usually the right side is wide enough that if you're making a right, you can get around it, and people will actually whip around there. It's not ideal, I agree. It's very
I'm-
substandard today.
It's not the west people going
The-
south, it's the west
So-
people going north that are the
So
problem,
Jason,
I think.
are there options?
So I think there are options.
Because you're putting amenities there now. Now there really isn't a ton of people crossing during rush hour there, not that I see. But now you're putting a bunch of amenities that people
Yeah.
coming down will want to cross there, and it's the natural people. Most people, it's human nature to take the shortest route and the most obvious
And
route.
with the walkability
And-
that you're building up there.
So, is there would a pedestrian refuge of some type, help at an island
Or
or
a
something?
blinking light.
So from operations, the refuge, they feel like they're going to remove it with the snowplows.
The
They're not a
geometry
big-
doesn't work, does that?
So they're not a big fan of it from a maintenance standpoint.
Maybe for the first summer.
I will point out that we will have a new signalized intersection 200 feet from this location. And then if you go south, there'll be it's 250 feet one way and 200 the other way. So you will have options that.
Is there a sidewalk here?
Yes.
All the way down?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you'll have options that you don't really
Not on
have
both
today.
sides.
Right now, there's not one on the other side. Is there going to be a sidewalk on the north side of Northwest?
Yes.
By the trail? Now
Yeah.
they're adding one.
Yep.
Basically a parallel to the trail.
Now they're-
I think it'd be foolish. I mean, you're not gonna have people walk 200 feet.
Well,
They're just not.
but I think it's a good comment to make. If we put a crosswalk in there, people will really think it's safe.
We should
And
only
I
put it
don't
in if
think
it's.
we can make it
We
safe.
should only put it in if it is safe. And we
We
should
can't-
just
I don't
paint
think
it
it's
if it
safe.
is.
All right, so I asked if there are options, and you said there's other crosswalks.
Yeah, so in terms of options at this intersection, they're not exactly great options, I would say. But sure, you could reduce the speed, as Paul pointed out to me today, which would shorten the sight distance issue. You could not put one in and put a barrier so people don't want to cross there. You could put an intersection, you could signalize it. I don't recommend that because of the proximity to the other intersections.
Is part of the site issue that there's street trees here?
Yeah, I think you would need to pull those back, but as somebody pointed out, that turning movement off of Grove Avenue is also going to be somewhat concerning.
That's what
Yeah.
Signage and.
So
look at those
blinking,
ridges and,
full-time crossing guard.
concrete.
Right.
I
I really
don't know.
love those. I
I
love
guess-
those ridges
I
in the
guess you
concrete.
could try and, if you clear the sight distance is the number one thing to me. But if you could clear it out and slow traffic down, I mean, that would lessen the severity.
The multicolored crosswalks
yeah,
that we
I-
talked about earlier.
I just don't see it as a good location. in
Sign that
general.
says run.
Run like your
But
life
there,
depends
but there are
on
ways
it.
to make it better.
The one thing we shouldn't do is put one of those beware of walker signs in the middle of the road.
Oh, sure.
Like
Well,
they do up, coming
yeah.
West Street going into Broad from the south.
So you see how banged up those are, right?
Well, plus the fact you can't get into the left-hand turn with any queuing whatsoever.
Yeah, but people do slow down now.
Oh, yeah, they do.
Those signs did, people, I would never see people slow down. Now they see the signs and they do slow down and look.
And people are getting more and more used to crosswalks.
If it weren't on a bend, I would be all in on trying to do something here. But
But I
the bend
just-
is really an issue.
I just think with signage or blinking lights or people get
People will
used to
cross,
it.
because other than that 1 hour a day, it actually isn't that busy at other times. It's really for about an hour and a half. The rest of the time, that part of West, the north is less busy than like Southwest Street. Northwest Street, that section is not that busy, although that block does get people going over to Lincoln to go
It's
eastbound.
really the right turners off of Broad Street heading up
Yeah.
west. That's what the danger is, because I'll see people get across halfway and then have to stop because someone's come up so fast on a right turn.
Which
And
honestly,
then they're stuck in the middle till that person goes by.
I don't know. I lived there for 7 years. I've never actually like come across someone in the middle of the road there, like during rush hour. I don't know. Maybe they just people know better.
Oh, I
right,
saw-
right now, there's not a lot of, you know,
There were
people
kids
crossing.
coming down from the high school, probably going to
Well, it could be
7-Eleven.
kids going
And
to
they
do
cut
that.
through Weston Park.
That's true.
But now when you're putting
They
all
always
those amenities
do.
there, you will see
Yeah.
tons.
Cut
But
through
now you don't
West
see
End Park.
tons, but I
They
could
cut
see
through Weston
how
Park and then they run across
people
the
will
street
come.
to 7-Eleven
Yep.
and traffic.
How about one at a time? Let's
Okay,
So, I do
we're
have a
getting a
question.
little out of hand.
I mean, pointing out that there is a sidewalk here and you can get there, that's compelling. And if you're going to the movie theater, you have no problem going up there and crossing. That's not a big deal. So it's really whatever's here, or I suppose trying to get to Market Square, it'd be annoying to go down. Is there, this sidewalk's gonna be right along West Street? I mean, to me, you're sort of encouraging people to come over here on this new sidewalk, and then they're walking along, they're just gonna be encouraged to cross. Like, can we have that sidewalk farther off of the street and put bushes between the sidewalk and the street or something?
We can't push it into the.
Park.
Yeah, park.
Yeah.
Right away.
All right.
To the bike park, bike trail park.
All right, so you got lots of feedback.
Good luck with that.
You asked for feedback. You
I mean,
didn't
the
ask for
reality is some people will
solutions.
cross no matter what. So if we don't paint it,
I do think if you don't
but I
put a
guess then it's
crosswalk.
like their own risk. I don't know. I mean, is that? I mean,
So I'll just say, from the chief engineer position for the city, I think a crosswalk here is dangerous. I would remove it.
So I'm on board with that. I think we have to replace it with some sort of signage that strongly encourages people just to go to one of the
If I
crosswalks.
could. So this project, when you compare, what's proposed in this plan from a pedestrian connectivity and accessibility standpoint compared to what's there today, they are dramatically different, the proposed versus the existing. That this is millions of dollars of work that I don't know that the city could complete in 5 or even 10 years. And what's shown here is, I think, consistent with what's in the recently adopted streetscape standards that talk about the quality of the materials, the frequency of pedestrian crossings was specifically raised. And there they were looking at Broad Street and recognizing, the task force was looking at Broad Street and recognizing that there's a lack of pedestrian connectivity in the city. And I think that this is a major set of amenities that's proposed for this location. It's in the city's small area plan. It's talked about in the POAs as the desire to connect people. And so this is a major crossing point not only for folks who live in the neighborhood, but also folks along the WNOD. And I think it's common for people to cross where they can. So I would think that, I think there are good points about the lack of visibility, especially if you're headed northbound on Northwest Street. Even the term pedestrian refuge, I think, paints this as sort of a strange picture where the street is this dangerous place where if you're not in a car, you need a safe haven just to get across it. So I think part of the question is not how do we get people across the street safely, but how do we think about the street as a place where people belong? and how do we safely get them from one side of the street to the other?
So,
I agree.
I mean, consistent with that, I mean, here's my own 2 cents on it. Certainly, the safety of the pedestrians needs to be the first and the main concern. I think a crosswalk makes sense here. I think based on what we're doing here from the building perspective and the amenities that we're providing, people are going to cross here at an increased number, and to provide some safety measure for them to cross is important. If it puts them in more danger, then I'm going to certainly defer to the principal engineer here. I would like to see it personally included with some thought to signage or lights and I also do think that you do need to be cognizant of people who are traveling this route for the first time, but the people who I think are going to be driving on this road overwhelmingly will be very familiar with this turn and the sight lines and how it interacts going forward. It's going to be people who are in the neighborhood generally. Certainly people going northwest who are not from the community, but I think overwhelmingly over a very short period of time people become familiar with it. But signage is important, and obviously safety is the sort of #1 priority. Can't put the citizens in greater danger. So that's my own personal
We
feedback.
got used to the pork chop.
So that's the vision, that's the feedback on the crosswalk. I want to go back to some minor other points related to the plan, and then maybe we're all done here.
I have one more comment when you're done.
Okay. So I am not sure I understand the commercial versus residential figures as it then relates to the increase in net revenue. So
On the fiscal impact?
On the fiscal impact. So my understanding is that because we've lost a hotel here and gone to age restriction, that the commercial development has gone considerably down and is now at 17.5% commercial to residential. Yet I'm now seeing that the fiscal net impact is going up. And I hear that we've changed the model a little bit and we've made some different assumptions about students, but I am not clear on how these numbers are working in opposite directions.
So and to be fair, this is probably a better question for staff to answer because they're the ones that ran the model with the inputs that we gave them. Our understanding is that since this project was approved, the city has studied the inputs to their model, specifically the students' expenses, tax rates, et cetera. When you update that for what we have today, the numbers that they're showing are accurate as compared to the other numbers that are shown. So as compared to the Insight project that was just approved. That is an apples-to-apples comparison of two commercial projects. As opposed to this 3 years ago versus today, I don't have an answer to that. I'll be transparent. So we've given them the inputs. We believe that some of the inputs are conservative, frankly, based on the business plans we've received from our retail tenants. But that's fine. It's up to the city to run their model as they see fit.
I mean, this percentage concerns me. I mean, I think that the amount of the loss of the hotel to me is significant, not only just from a percentage standpoint for the sake of being a percentage, but because of the activation of the area and how people will spend money and the additional trips and how that generates income for the city. Yet I'm being shown a model, a net fiscal impact model that's showing that this is going to be beneficial to the project. Those two things seem a little bit incongruent to me.
Sure.
And so I want to understand, and maybe you're right, it's for staff, but I am concerned that a project of this nature is at 17.5%. That's a big
Well,
deal
if
to me.
I may, this is from the staff's model. So the middle column does express the commercial percentage for recently approved projects. So as you can see, Founders Row is at 17%. The Spectrum project is 18%, so that's plus or minus. The Rushmark project was 15%, so again, plus or minus. The Insight project is 26% because of the office nature of this. But the office nature of commercial, from a fiscal impact perspective, at least my understanding, is that office isn't necessarily a massive contributor to the fiscal impact model. So if you look at it from just a commercial mix perspective, we're in line with most of the other approved projects. And again, we are healthily above, at the midpoint, we're healthily above where the net annual revenue per acre is coming on these other projects. And I think the best comparison is the Insight project, which was most recently done with this model. So again, this isn't to bash any other projects, and I wouldn't pretend to be an expert on the model. I I can just say that working with city staff, this is, and their new assumptions, this is how it's turned out. So I think the commercial percentage and its impact on the fiscal impact is maybe not, there's not a direct correlation there.
There might not be a direct correlation. To me, the lack of correlation has to do with the fact that this is 4 acres and the other ones were single buildings. So I appreciate that this statistic is based on a per acre basis, and you've tried to normalize it. But in terms of the expectations for a development of this size in this location of the city, I had been hoping for and expecting a higher commercial component, which had been presented to us,
Understood.
So it has dropped precipitously, and I'm trying to, honestly make sense of that, and then that drop, again, I'm now repeating myself, but that drop, as opposed to also showing a net increase in the fiscal impact, to me, I do want to know a little bit, I want to understand that a little bit better. In terms of the parking, I heard it has a 3% reduction from the previous plan. Is that correct? Was that a number that I got correct?
To clarify, that is a reduction from code.
Okay, so overall, it's a 3% reduction from code.
Correct.
And what part, residential?
That is the combined site. The residential component is, we're seeking approximately 20% reduction. Now, we're working through, revisions to the site plan, so that number may tweak a little bit, but that's what we're showing right now. The actual non-residential component is a little bit overparked in the site plan.
What's the theory behind that?
Funny you should ask. So this is a big point of discussion in boards and commissions. I apologize. I have a slide on the parking, so I was going to scroll down to that for your reference.
Also, is residential parking, is that going to be part of the apartment price, or is that going to be an additional charge?
It's an additional charge. Now, it might be also included in the apartment price. There's a base rental fee, and whether the advertised fee includes a parking spot or not, that's an operational question that we'll decide. But it's in line with the parking costs for other projects in the area. In addition to the parking ratio, so we're parking. Well, that's not what I wanted to click.
I think if you hit the presentation, there you go.
Sorry, I couldn't see. So the residential parking is at a 1.3 spaces per unit ratio. That is in line with other mixed-use projects. This goes away eventually, I'm not sure. There it goes.
Lovely.
So it's parked at 1.3 spaces per unit, which is a ratio that is fairly common for the city. As a comparison, we developed the apartments at the Mosaic project. The Modera Mosaic is a Mill Creek project. That was designed to be parked at a 1.5 ratio. It is the same distance from Metro. You could argue it's a more urban environment, honestly, than this. It's probably a cleaner connection to Metro than that is. That is currently occupied at 0.9 spaces per unit. So even at 1.3 spaces per unit, that's in line. We have to design the residential
To
parking.
give you my perspective on
sure.
this, I'm unhappy at how high the number is.
Oh, at how high the number is.
Yeah,
So
I'm not upset about this part of it.
Sure.
3% off our code, to me, seems overparked. I'm agreeing with you, so I want to understand why we're parking
so
so
more importantly on this is the retail parking. To be frank, the retail parking drives the success of the retail environment here. What I can tell you is that we engaged Urban Land Institute, ULI, to do a comprehensive study of the parking on this site. They have an extensive model that they've put together that evaluates parking at a project like this based on the type of use, the size of the use, the day of the week of the month of the year. And it runs for all these variables to show where your peak parking would be. The average, we have about 509 spaces, which on average on a weekend, you're looking at about 475 occupiable spaces. At the peak around the December holidays, it's about 540 spaces. So for 90% of the year, we'll have an appropriate amount of parking. For the other parts of the year, we'll actually have to have a valet to come on site to make sure that this is parked. Based on, and again, that's the ULI model, that's confirmed by our retail designers, by the retail experience experts and our brokers.
Did the ULI help you on the Mosaic?
ULI, we didn't, that was just residential. That's strictly residential. So right here, we're following a residential model that has been borne out in other residential projects here in the city of Falls Church.
Okay, so I'm confused.
Mhm.
If you thought the residential, the Mosaic was going to be 1.5 and it's a 0.9, who studied that? Who got that wrong?
That was based on, everything we do is based on studying a market and making a best guess going forward. Going into the Mosaic project, we were under the impression that a mile from Metro, based on comparable product, mind you, we were creating a destination in Mosaic, it was a little bit TBD, 1.5, 1.4, what we parked it at, what we designed it to be, that was thought to be appropriate for the market, not based on just Mill Creek, but Delta Associates bringing in market experts. Here, if you look at the market and what Falls Church residences are parked at, it's about a 1.3 ratio. There's always the ability down the line to convert parking if necessary from one use to another.
Right.
But based on these, the other issue is that it tends to be that older residents, such as the age restricted, will have a car as opposed to, which may be counterintuitive, as opposed to a younger resident who's more likely to get by public transportation, by walking. So we are accounting for that as well, that there's a boost in the parking requirement for the age restricted as well.
All right, so on the retail side,
Mm-hmm.
you're overparked,
Based on code.
right? Which I think is a generous code, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And you're concerned that this is, the reason for this is because of the December rush? That's why we're parking?
I think the concern is the concern is not based on the peak. The concern is based on an average. If you're building a 500 space parking garage plus or minus, and 450, 470 spaces are occupied, and you're spending your time trying to find those last 20 to 30 spaces, that's a frustrating experience that could kill our retail. I can tell you that the retail tenants that we're going after, they think that this is an appropriate parking ratio, if not a little bit light. So it's been a yin and yang between building code, between what we're being told by the market, and trying to find that happy medium for maximizing parking and maximizing the experience for our residents and for people visiting the retail.
I guess one of the points to add, the retail, a significant amount of it is dining and restaurant, and which is a higher ratio. And they're just using a shopping center rate for the combined commercial side, less the theater. So in other words, the restaurant, retail, they're using a shopping center rate of 300.
Condensation of time.
Okay. You gotta sell it. It's your money. So I'm not gonna tell you not to spend your money on parking.
As
but
a developer, if we don't get parking right, we've failed on the project.
Agreed.
So we have to study this, and like you said, I mean that's cost. So we are doing our best to make sure that we're balancing the cost with what we're being told by the market is what we need. So that's really the best way I can answer that, in addition to the academic answer of the ULL model and studying and doing research.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
I think Melissa had something.
I did.
Yep, go for it.
So when you were saying you have 50% of your retail lease, that's the movie theater and the restaurant?
Correct.
The beer place?
Correct, CityWorks.
Yeah, okay. So then you don't have anything else leased at this point?
Not on the
Yeah.
lease.
One of the things I thought was interesting is CityWorks is on the inside and not like on the corner, which would seem to me would make it a more of a marketing piece for you, because I mean, I think there's nothing sadder than a new building with nothing open yet on the bottom floor.
Sure.
And it happens all around us. I see it in Arlington too. So is it just their choice? They want to be on the interior because they want to use the Market Square?
Yep. Market Square, proximity to parking, proximity to the movie theater was their choice to be in that spot.
Yeah, and I just thought it was interesting though. So they're across the drive aisle from the Market Square.
Correct.
Right.
So I'm kind of surprised they didn't take the corner one, which you now have two fast casuals, and that way they were actually on the right side of the drive aisle from it, but they're also interior.
Well, they also have a very large space, so they needed to be able to carve out a large space. What I can say is that like this corner, that's going to be a restaurant. I mean, that just screams restaurant and activation from that perspective. Same with the Market Square, and the feedback we're getting. Just so you know, we have the two leases. There have been plenty of letters of intent sent our way for people that want to be here, and the majority of them are restaurants, and they're identifying spaces as you're describing
And
them.
I hope so, because I mean, I've seen some buildings in Arlington with a space like that, and now they have a mattress
Some
store in them.
buildings
But
Well, I think that's a prohibited use, so you won't have a
I know, we
mattress
won't have
there.
that problem, but I'm just saying, now everyone gets what they want. I just want to follow up to Mr. Wadisco's talking a little bit about the loss of the hotel, the ratio. And I get what you're saying, you're going back and looking at other projects, but it has been an actual goal of ours, has been to up that ratio. We'd always wanted to be over 20%.
Right.
And that is what been our focus. with each project to try to get it there. So so it's kind of, you guys were in that same, you were a better ratio than Insight, and that was kind of helping us get to where we wanted to be. So we're not very happy about it. But one of the things that I have heard all along about this project from not just the people in the neighborhoods adjacent to it, but actually people in the city in general, is the massing of this thing, because it's big, it's a lot of acreage. And I kind of felt in the beginning, so we had 322 units, and it seemed like a lot, but it seemed reasonable when you guys had the costs of both the theater and the hotel. Because I know both of those products expect a build out, they expect to get a building. It's not like they're gonna come in and buy that hotel building from you. So I guess one of the things I'm wondering is why aren't we seeing a reduction in units? Because we don't need as many units now to support the financial cost of that hotel and that theater. And I really believe if you could take some of this building and bring it down to 5 stories, well, I guess it's retail and 5 of residential, but I really believe you could bring down by a story some sections of this, that you would have a lot of community members be much more positive about the project. I mean, I just say this because I don't have as much problems with the height, because I don't think it's that bad, but that's an overwhelming community feel. I see it in many letters we get. I see it at community meetings. So, I mean, I just want to put that out there, because I know, so now we're at 394 units, and I know the 72 are the age restricted, but those residences still have a cost to the city. Unless they're not going to use roads or the libraries or the sidewalks or the parks or do anything in the city but sit in their apartment. So my assumption is they are going to be out there using resources just like every other citizen. So I just feel like the overall units is just too high now without the hotel. And that you guys have lost that big cost. And I believe you could still have a hotel in the project. I think that ultimately you looked at the finances and said, we don't want to pay for a hotel. So, and I get that, because that's your choice. But I do think that that really would go a long way to making a lot of people much happier if you could bring down the mass in a little bit.
I'll try to respond to that quickly. I know we've spent a lot of time at our work sessions talking about the hotel. The reality is it behooved us to have a hotel here when we had that opportunity, and we really did hard due diligence to try to get a hotel on the site. We're not exaggerating when we say we met with 40 operators over a 1.5 year long period to be here, and we were giving them it for free. We were giving them the land for free to construct. So that says economically, macroeconomically, microeconomically, this site didn't fit for a hotel. So with that reality, and with our reality and discussing with city
staff. And I'm fine with that. I don't think you need to back that up.
And I'm not trying to.
But what I'm saying now is you're no longer having to give this land to anyone. So your overall costs have come down. So therefore, do you need the same amount of units to make this project work financially?
Well, our overall cost hasn't come down because we have to put something needs to go on this pad, right? And but that's the key. That's the crux of the matter, right? It's meeting with the city to determine a hotel is not a viable option at this point in time on this site.
To move from the hotel.
How do we provide the city with a benefit that's a use that they don't have? We could have proposed 72 more apartment units, knowing that wasn't viable. So we believe that the age-restricted use is a use the city doesn't have. Frankly, it's a use that nowhere inside the Beltway has.
I agree with all those points. We don't have that use currently. We don't have it. I get all of that. I do not disagree with any of that. All I'm saying is that I believe, because you now have units that you can rent to age-restricted, and you're no longer having to give property to a hotel, so you don't have that cost. I believe that the overall cost of the project to you has come down, and you're going to have more revenue from those age-restricted apartments. So overall, I'm just saying, I think you probably could take some units off of this project and bring a little bit of it down, like 1 story. And I think you would generate a lot of goodwill with a lot of people in the city. That's all I'm trying to
No, and I
convey.
appreciate that. I appreciate
That's
that.
it. I don't disagree with anything you're saying.
Okay. Okay.
However, could I give an alternative opinion? I know we want to go home, but I'm going to talk, because I agreed with you, a lot of the thinking and everything, and I kept thinking about it. And then the more we talk about having a daytime critical mass in the city is getting to be more and more of a situation with restaurants and everything, the need. Some restaurants don't want to come in, don't want to have the restaurants because they don't have any lunch business. So we're getting a big office building with the inside. I think that with the age restricted, hopefully more will be retired, staying in the city. We'll have more pedestrian traffic out there, and so that we will have more, availability to have more of a livelier atmosphere in there, and that's where I'm coming from on it. But because I've switched totally gears on it and thinking, okay, people in the hotel, they pay extra and they come and leave, but they don't have the viability that we're going to get with a different kind of product within the city.
I'll echo that. I agree 100%. Initially, I was disappointed about the hotel, but I think that people who live there as age-restricted rentals will have more of an investment in the community. Hotel is transient. Hotel would mostly be dead during the day, just like the Hilton Garden Inn is a ghost town during the day. People sleep there at night. They use it as
And
a
leave.
cheaper location than like staying in Arlington, and then they're gone during the day. And so I totally agree with that argument. I think the hotel is good. I think actually most of my neighbors who are on Lincoln Avenue, just 2 blocks away, view it as actually a positive change by and large, and are okay with the massing. And so I wouldn't agree that it's a universal statement that everyone thinks the massing is too much and needs to be reduced. I think there's a
I
segment.
didn't mean as universal, it's one I've heard of.
Yeah,
and
there are
over
some
again.
people who believe that, but
And
there
that's
are
what
plenty
they
of
said
people-
about the Harris Teeter.
There are plenty of people who don't, and those are people who live in proximity and are looking forward to the amenities this will bring. And I think having the age-restricted component, I think it actually turned out to be a positive change.
All right.
Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
See you in 2 weeks.
So much.
We can do it again. Number 10.
No, that's okay.
Happy 4th, everyone.
Yes.
I got one.
Oh, yeah. Planning commissioners, any other comments before I adjourn? No?
Adjourn.
We're adjourned.